7, and you are listening to The Fringe FM.
The Fringe FM loves hearing from you. Have a suggestion, comment, or question? We're all ears. Email talkback@thefringe.fm.
Howdy, this is Catalina, and you're listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop.
This is Paranormal News. I'm Ryan Gable of The Secret Teachings. A star that dims even more than Tabby's star? Better stop the presses. Astronomers have discovered a star just 440 light years from Earth that dims by as much as 80% for nearly a day at a time. That's 4 times as dim as the find in 2015. So where is all of the talk of an alien megastructure? Researchers are pondering just about everything but that. From a red dwarf star to dust moving in front of the star as some of the possibilities.
I call this enemy the sun. Since the beginning of time, man has yearned to destroy the sun. I will do the next best thing. Block it out.
Harvard scientists have a bold plan to block out the sun by launching a balloon in the southwest United States that releases small particles of calcium carbonate. The stratospheric-controlled perturbation experiment, or SCOPEX, will be the first real attempt to control the temperature on Earth through geoengineering in an effort to impact climate change. The $3 million project is partially funded by Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates. The balloon could begin spewing chalk into the air sometime this spring. Read these stories and more at paranormalradio.com. In for John Jeter, I'm Ryan Gable, Paranormal News.
The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the Fringe FM, KTLK Digital Broadcasting, its sponsors, affiliates, or staff. Listener discretion is advised.
Message is being broadcast by the Department of Defense of the Republic. At 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, multiple unidentified objects were confirmed to have entered Earth's atmosphere.
Discovery Houston, 20 seconds to LOS T-Drift.
The first message that comes to you is you are a divine being. You matter. You count. You come from realms of unimaginable power and light, and you will return to those realms.
The vast stretches of the unknown and the unanswered and the unfinished still far outstrip our collective comprehension.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios, all the way from the Deep South. Now, here is your host, Joe Roop.
Good evening. I'm Joe Roop, and this is Lighting the Void. It is Tuesday night, March the 12th. Thank you all for joining us wherever you're listening from across the World Wide Web. Countdown to the equinox. I am stoked. Only 7 more days. I cannot wait. We are live on KTLK Digital Broadcasting, the Fringe FM. That website is thefringe.fm, and our website is lightingthevoid.com. Tonight, Mr. Anyextee is with us, and we're going to be discussing esoteric research and his travels into archaeology and more. I've always wanted to talk to this guy, so this is really going to be cool. This is going to be an awesome show. Last night, I wanted to say real quick that I apologize. The station was down. We had some major bugs we had to work out. Maureen St. Germain was supposed to be on last night, so we have to reschedule. We had to reschedule that, and so all is well there. No worries. If you want to call in tonight, anytime, well, when I open the phones up, it's 1-800-588-0335. You can text in the show at 501-777-5631. And you can contact me at contact@lightingthevoid.com. So, yeah, we're going to get into some deep discussion tonight. And I can tell you that this guy is a very, very interesting fellow, very knowledgeable guy as well. And the thing about it is I've been kind of following him. I kind of admitted this to him earlier. I've been following this guy for a while now, watching him. And, he was kind of mentored by John Anthony West, and he put up some episodes on YouTube with John on, and I've been kind of following him ever since. I always wanted to talk to him. But let me tell you a little bit about him if you don't already know. Next Anyextee is an esoteric researcher, author, public speaker, filmmaker, artist, and tour guide who has been called to investigate the ancient mysteries, metaphysics, and mysticism. He transformed his passion for exploration into an esoteric tour company dedicated to providing travelers with more meaningful experiences. He is the producer of The Sacred History of the Rosicrucians and the founder of Adept Expeditions, Adept Initiates, and Ancient Egypt Mystery Schools, and leads tours through the Yucatan, Mexico, and Egypt. And you can check out the website at anyextee.com and adeptinitiates.com. Mr. Next Anyextee, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks, Joe. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, man. I can't wait to dig into this. I really, the thing about it is when I watched you interview John Anthony West, and I kind of followed you, really jealous actually, because I can tell you being stuck in a radio tower when you watch people going around and traveling to these places like the Yucatan and Egypt and stuff, your mouth tends to drool a little bit out of jealousy because you yearn for adventure when you're stuck in these radio booths, so I can imagine. I really want to talk about that and some of your experiences with that as well.
Yes. And, the thing is, Joe, it's funny because I get that often. A lot of people on Facebook who be like, oh, I'm jealous. They see a post. And that's the last way I want to make anyone feel. If anything, my mission is to inspire people, not to make them jealous and say, hey, look at what we're doing, but to say, hey, look at what we're doing as an example of what you could be doing if you set your mind to it as well, and or take from this body of knowledge or research and my experiences to help raise consciousness. So it's really all about inspiration. So it breaks my heart when I hear people say that, they're jealous. But, I like to replace that word with inspired. Yeah.
Inspired, jealous, angry, whatever, right? No, I'm just playing. All right. So the Rosicrucians. Well, let's start here. You are a person that was in the music industry and moved into the esoteric field. I know you've been asked this question, but I personally don't know how that happened at all.
Yeah. So, okay. So I wouldn't say I moved. Well, I wouldn't say I moved into the esoteric field because I've always been interested in esoteric subject matter and esoteric literature and the ancient mysteries, exploring the human history story. I've always had a penchant for this stuff, even when I was in the music industry. In fact, they kind of go in tandem because while I was in the music industry, I had my own company. Several of them actually. I had a distribution company, several record labels. Mm-hmm. We also launched the first digital store in the history of the genre, of the hip-hop genre. This was before even Amazon Digital had launched. I launched this digital store, done a bunch of stuff. I managed artists and put out records and the whole nine. And so in that process, as an entrepreneur, I was an independent. I wasn't attached in the beginning to any major label, although later I was invited. I've been contacted and contracted by all the major labels. I've done marketing for them. I've done consulting for them and worked with them, distributed records for them. But in the beginning, for the most part, it was always an independent operation. So I was an entrepreneur, and as an entrepreneur, we always want to be the best version of ourselves for our business so that we can grow that business. And so in that process, you're reading a lot of I didn't go to college. I don't have any college degrees. In fact, I almost barely graduated high school, and I started working immediately after high school. And it was really my love for, and growing up in the hip hop culture and my love for music that pulled me into the business of it, really as a means to support what I was doing. You know, it all happened organically. You know, not to make the show about music. I'm trying to kind of keep that in the past, but just because you asked the question, to bring everything up to speed. You know, it started really young for me. I want to say around the same time I wanted to be Indiana Jones, I also wanted to be a rapper. I was watching Run DMC and listening to the Beastie Boys. And it was something about the lyrics and the ability to deliver a message to people. You know, I had an older brother who would listen to like Ozzy Osbourne and like rock stuff. And I couldn't get into that genre at that time. For me, it was the lyricism and hip hop that attracted me, and the beat. It was refreshing. It sounded different. So I wanted to be an MC. I wanted to communicate a message. I couldn't do that unless I had the music. So when I was very young, I got a paper route and worked an entire summer to get enough money to buy my first set of turntables, to become a DJ, to play my music so I could rap to. Then it turned into making mixtapes and selling those in high school. And that eventually grew into an independent distribution company and homegrown record label. And from there, I mean, that was a little bit over time, but eventually, I mean, I grew it into a full-scale corporation. I had 16 employees, several offices, warehouse space, state-of-the-art studio. We're shipping records all around the world. We put out a number of established artists. You know, I've helped develop a lot of careers. But in that process, you're always trying to, you know, when you're caught up in that space and in the monetary system in corporate America, you're trying to always grow the business, right? That was my mindset back then. It was indeed profit driven when I was younger. I didn't really come from a wealthy background. So I was determined to, you know, build my finances through what I love. And, you know, in that process, you're reading a lot, right? So I'd go to the store and I'd get the bookstore and I'd try to get books to better educate myself. Because again, I didn't have an MBA. I didn't know how to even start a business. I had to look everything up from scratch. How do you start? What's a LLC? What's a corporation? What's a DBA? What, you know, and I basically taught myself everything. But in that process, you kind of move into the self-help section and you try to become a better version of yourself for your business. And then eventually that, you know, overlaps with spirituality and esotericism. And, you know, and it just gets to that point where you want something more. You're looking for something deeper. And especially if you're excessive with it like me, I tore through all those books. And then I started looking at the references in the back and I realized that, you know, I needed something more. And that's what led to my deeper research and eventually my travels.
Yeah, so to me, it's like, here's the thing that I really wanted to talk to you about, that I really wanted to get in depth with, if it was possible. I really wanted to get in depth with, and I want to make sure that we're hooked up here, too, to the station real quick. I really wanted to get in depth with you about the Rosicrucians, because in my mind, I feel like that they've always been kind of misrepresented, so to speak. And that's kind of, and when I say misrepresented, I don't mean like that when people are talking about the Rosicrucians that they don't know what they're talking about, but I hear so many times it's brought up and put into negative connotations, or people don't really know exactly what they're talking about. And so it's like a rare thing when I run into somebody that really does know what they're talking about. Do you feel like that this society, which I know that you study and you're involved with, is being represented properly nowadays?
That's a great question, Joe. And I feel like that really depends on the individual. Collectively, there's so many different people with so many different ideas. You know, ask a Rosicrucian, they'll tell you one thing. Ask somebody who studies Rosicrucian, they'll tell you something else. Ask someone who hasn't gone that far along on the path, they may tell you something else. You know, it depends on the individual's perspective. I will say that there is a lot of widely accepted misinformation, especially stuff on the internet about the Rosicrucians and Freemasonry and, you know, Western esoteric organizations in general, you know, the Illuminati, and they're trying to control the world and a lot of these ideas. that are perpetuated in books by authors sometimes who just want to make money and create these things or stretch the truth to perpetuate false narratives. I can tell you that from my experience, that's not what Rosicrucianism is about. I will say that it is one of the most enigmatic of Western esoteric initiatic orders. And, it's just an amazing movement, an amazing tradition that really overlaps with and is connected very much so to most of the Western esoteric mystery traditions and mystery traditions in general that go all the way back to perhaps the primordial tradition, the eternal wisdom tradition that many of my colleagues are searching for when we talk about the lost civilizations and, these early traditions. And there's a lot of overlapping with indigenous traditions as well. And so I think that I know that the Rosicrucian tradition has been a storehouse for this ancient wisdom, which is of service to humanity, not working against humanity. I mean, you could take, for example, the Rosicrucian Order Amorc, whose headquarters are in San Jose, California. They do a wealth of service. They're humanitarians. They do a wealth of service for human beings. I mean, even if you go to Rosicrucian Park, it's a 0 point energy grounds. There's a lot happening there, and you can see and feel the intent. And it's unfortunate not everyone has the opportunity to go there. And that's why I think, not to ramble on too much here, but that's why I think the series that I produced and narrate for the Rosicrucian Order Amorc is important. It's a 9-part series that's available for the general public. You can watch it on my YouTube channel on the playlist, youtube.com/ANYEXTEE, or actually just go straight to Rosicrucian TV, if you will. And so the series explores the traditional timeline of the Rosicrucian, going all the way back to Egypt and even Atlantis, which the Rosicrucian Order or Amorc considers part of their tradition, part of the lineage. And so really they have accumulated, and this stuff is stated in the text when you go back. Rosicrucians have been talking about this for centuries, how it's not just one single tradition. It's actually an amalgam of many traditions. We're talking about the Pythagorean mystery tradition, the traditions of ancient Egypt, Isis, Osiris, alchemy, Hermeticism. It's all there. And so that series does a wonderful job, I think, of communicating their traditional timeline and exploring that traditional timeline. Each episode focuses on different traditions.
I find the history of the Rosicrucians is so mysterious to me because, they got the manifesto, the chemical wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz, or however some people pronounce it different. And then when you look back, like, who were the first Rosicrucians and where did they come from? A very mysterious background. I would say the most secretive part of that whole thing is how it got started and people that were involved with it in the beginning. We really we know some of the players, but we really don't know the true actual story. I don't. And I've researched the hell out of it, man, trying to figure out who were the first Rosicrucians. Everybody says, well, it was, Francis Bacon, it was John Dee, it was this and that, but nobody really knows, right? They really don't.
Joe, it's a similar situation with Freemasonry, right? We can trace the roots back. The historians can trace roots back to the 18th and 17th century, even. However, there's legends that go even further back. The same holds true for many Western esoteric organizations. I would say with Rosicrucianism, it really all began in 1614 with the publication of the Fama Fraternitatis, which was a text that revealed the existence of the Rosicrucian fraternity to Europe. However, the tradition itself derives from this ongoing, going all the way back to the primordial tradition. And further, there is a connection with the Rosicrucian Order Amorc to ancient Egypt. If you really, if you were to, so if you want to go back to ancient Egypt, we really have to look at Thutmose and Akhenaten, his great-grandson. That is really the traditional foundation for the Rosicrucian order. Akhenaten was, some consider him a heretic, others a hero, shrouded in mystery, mysterious character. If you were to look at his figure, almost alien, extraterrestrial-esque features. Yeah. He has the childbearing hips and the long, elongated, face.
He's one of the first priests that decided that there was just one God instead of all the other God systems, right? And they came against him. That's the story I heard, anyways.
Well, the situation there is Akhenaten was responsible for not only a revolution, a spiritual revolution, but an artistic revolution, right? He changed the way that artwork, the whole Armana style art in Egypt, is significantly different from the artwork previously. Furthermore, the way he was depicted for the first time in history, we're seeing his, for lack of better terms, I want to say deformed, childbearing hips, in this odd figure, whereas traditionally in Egypt, you have really, I almost want to say perfect characteristics. Akhenaten wanted to portray himself as he was. And so that was an important teaching at that time. In addition to that, he really brought it back to the teachings of his great-grandfather and the tradition that, really, if you go back to his great-great-grandfather, Thutmose, along with Hatshepsut, who was, this is the other thing. People often overlook Hatshepsut, who was a female. I hesitate to use the word pharaoh. Academically, she's known as a pharaoh, the female pharaoh. But her, along with Hatshepsut, was, she was responsible for organizing the fragmented mystery schools of ancient Egypt at that time into a single order. This is really the roots of the Rosicrucian order, Amorc. From there, what happens is it gets fragmented. You have, when we say God or gods in Egypt, as Hollywood has programmed us to believe in Egypt, even academia and Egyptology. If we look at the works of John Anthony West's main source of inspiration, R.A. Schwaller de Lubitsch, the occultist and great philosopher and symbolist, Schwaller is one of the first ones to really change our perspective when it comes to the gods. He identified them as the Netters, the Netteru, which were principles in nature or cosmological principles, not necessarily gods, but these metaphysical forces, right? The principles and aspects of nature and cosmological principles. Okay. And so that's what was really happening. And so in Egypt, you have all these different anthropomorphic figures and symbols that are really a representation of principles and fragmented principles. And this ties right in with the understanding of the Hermetic tradition, the Emerald Tablet, the idea of the one mind and the one thing emanating from the all. It saw this fractal, splintered class of all these different forces. And so what happened was there was a point in Egypt where, different camps were identifying with different deities, and there were different cults, the cult of Hathor, and, all these different factions. And people kind of got away from the one thing and the one mind that's in the very basis of the Hermetic tradition. It's rooted in the Emerald Tablet. The one thing and the one mind really are one and the same, but at the same time, there are different aspects. But the one mind is this concept in Hermeticism of the divine mind, which I guess you could call a god. We like to use the term the divine or the cosmic. You can use any term that you feel comfortable with, and so it was really like, for lack of better terms, a bunch of these gods or lesser gods. And Akhenaten brought that all back together and reminded the people that, look, this is all a fractal of the totality. And he identified, the sun and the Aten as the one, and connected that to the one mind, the one thing, to remind us, because the sun was the closest thing to symbolize that connection. So That's important, you know, because even Schwal de Lubitsch in his work, he'll refer to it as the absolute, the one in Pythagorean number mysticism, which I'm so grateful to my mentor, the late, great symbolist, author, and rogue Egyptologist, John Anthony West, the great granddaddy of them all, for blessing me with this gift of understanding Pythagorean number mysticism. You know, everyone knows John for the mystery of the Sphinx and the water erosion theory, and you know, being the man who brought Robert Schoch on board to, you know, identify the water erosion, and basically left this, you know, shock to academia. They turned the whole game upside down. But there's so much more to John, as you know. You've had him on your show. I mean,
God, I miss him. I really do.
Man, we all do. I mean, he was cut from another cloth. He was truly the last of a very specific breed. And, you know, it's I don't even want to say he's not here today, because in reality,
yeah, he is. He's here.
He is. And he was practicing the work. He was very much into G.I. Gurdjieff and the work, the fourth way. And John was putting that into practice. That's another gift that John blessed me with, another lesson, a lesson in presence.
You got to go on a trip with him, didn't you? You toured. Did you go on an Egyptian tour with John Anthony? See, man.
So I got to connect.
That was my ultimate thing I wanted to do. That's a bucket list thing for everybody, you know. And you know what was sad is he was like, "Come on, man! Like, you know, we'll give you a discount if you bring so many people." Man, I really hate that I missed out on that, but I'd love to hear about your experience with it.
You know, I hear so many people say that. Even my own wife, she never had the opportunity to go with John. She met John after the fact. We hung out with him, you know, afterwards and connected with him at some events and helped him out and stuff. But she didn't have that opportunity to go to Egypt with him. And I hear that all the time from so many people. And that's part of the inspiration in, you know, what we do today with the Esoteric Egypt tour through Adept Expeditions. You can learn more about that at adeptexpeditions.com. Really trying to continue that tradition and carry the torch. And not run the same show. It's not all John Anthony West. Obviously, I'm my own individual. I've learned from John. I've learned from many others as well. But, you know, we certainly pay homage to his work and first and foremost try to carry the standard and recreate the type of experience that he created for me. So I did have the opportunity to go to Egypt with him on a study trip. In fact, it was a very unique trip, unlike any other, for a number of reasons, specifically because it was a private study trip. It was every year John would do his annual Enneagram Institute trip with the Enneagram. It was an Enneagram trip with the Enneagram Institute, which is an organization that works with the Enneagram symbol. And so, you know, it was interesting. I was on, all right, so let's rewind. I remember way back in the early 90s when the documentary came out, but I didn't pay as much attention to it back then. It wasn't until years later when I was digging deeper. And then, you know, I remembered him. And then there was a point when I was watching, you know, I feel like I'm repeating Joe Rogan here, but I was sitting on the couch watching Magical Egypt over and over and over. And then a few synchronicities had happened, and it just led me to the point where I'm like, this is the man I need to learn from. Like I had already been to Egypt on my own accord. I've been to Egypt before John, but I knew there was more.
He was your Obi-Wan, right?
He was my Obi-Wan, man. He was Yoda in the flesh. Yeah. And so I, interestingly enough, I reached out to him, started some dialogue. I had wanted to go on I knew he did the tours, and I wanted to go on one. And he, at the time, all right, so this is literally, it was either 1 or 2 weeks before the tour. And I'd reached out, and I'm talking to him, and he's like, oh, well, you know, this tour is already filled up. Maybe you can go, you know, on the next one. You know, but I really wanted to go. And I was at this weird place in my life because I was kind of in that phase where I was leaving the music industry behind. I was leaving the corporate world. Even though I had a successful career there, I just had enough of the corporate demand, the monetary system, not that I have a problem with dark sides, because I think great men do work in the dark to bring light, but there's a adverse or negative side to the music industry. And I wanted, it just didn't align with me. I got to the point where I felt like I wasn't even being myself and I wasn't congruent with who I truly was. And in order to come into alignment, I had to change my trajectory and walk away from the music industry. And so it was kind of during that period that I started to connect with John, and I was doing some film projects, some passion projects. I had gone to Egypt the year before, and I actually produced a documentary film there entitled Egypt Through the Glass Shop. It's about this American-born glass artist who had moved to Egypt and opened up his own shop, connected with some Egyptian partners, and together opened up a glass shop. And he actually revolutionized, and glass is so important because it's rooted in Egypt and Mesopotamia, the art of glass making. And so he helped advance some techniques and provided a crucial update to the way that Egyptian glass is typically worked with. Anyway, while he's there, he was living a block away from Tahrir Square, literally a block. While he's there, the whole Arab Spring pops off, the revolution, the whole nine. Long story short, I filmed this documentary with him, and it ends up becoming a dual documentary about his journey as a glass artist in Egypt, but at the same time, we capture the essence of the Egyptian revolution, right, in 2011, 2012. Anyway, I had put together a trailer. I had started presenting the film at different film festivals. And John noticed in my bio or in my profile or something somewhere, I don't exactly know how he made the connection, but in one of my emails, he realized I was a filmmaker and he took it on it. I didn't even send him a link. I guess he went and looked, he found the link on YouTube or something through our conversation. That's what prompted it. But then, okay, so what happened was in the email, or in the call, I forget which took place first, but our I think it was all email for us. So I emailed him, and he told me that this was basically that the trip was full and that it was a private trip, and moreover, it was a special trip which was limited to a specific amount of people because he would have the dahabaya. The dahabaya is a boat in Egypt. It's a large, basically a private yacht, and he had secured the dahabaya Afendina, and so there's only 8 cabins. They can have a total of 16 people, and it was already full. There was no way I was getting on this trip.
I've always wondered about this, your story with John. We got to take a break. We'll be right back, guys, with the next Anyextee. Stay with us.
To Lighting the Void Radio.
The truth is out there.
There's something out here.
And so are we. KTLK Digital Broadcasting, The Fringe FM.
Hi, this is Aaron Hunter, host of Real Paranormal Activity, the podcast where we tell real paranormal experiences of people from around the world. And we also conduct interviews with authors, investigators, psychics, and mediums. Real people, real stories, real fear. Thursdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on The Fringe FM. See you then.
When I'm done running with the wolves after hunting down a half-ton bison, I look forward to a mind-teetering escapade evening on The Fringe FM.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
This is Cortana from Shift Happens, telling you to pour a glass and park your ass because you're listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM. Shithead.
I'm Ryan Gable, and I want to remind you to keep your radio, phone, tablet, or computer tuned to The Fringe FM and visit the website, thefringe.fm. secreteachings.fm to listen to the entire lineup of shows. You can also catch my broadcast, The Secret Teachings, Monday through Friday, beginning at 12 a.m. midnight U.S. Pacific Time, right here on The Fringe FM.
Folks, this is very important information. What's to be said about CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. Our CBD is made from hemp and has 0.003 THC, which means this wonderful product won't get you high, no matter what amount you take. What does CBD do for the body? My hands are tied. But you can Google CBD benefits and be astounded. When you're finished reading, you'll want to log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. And purchase. Life is good when you feel good. People are tired of pain. People are asking for non-GMO organic products to help them with, you fill in the blank. Legal in 49 states, and again, our CBD is made from hemp. Ancient Life Oil is about helping people one by one by one. If you wonder how good the product is, the CEO takes it every day without miss. AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Have a great day.
All right, welcome back to Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Roop. You are listening live on the Fringe FM. Don't forget that the Fringe FM also has an app. You can download that app at the iTunes App Store or the Google Play Store if you want to use it. You can get it on Amazon Alexa. And we're also over on TalkStream Live and the Paranormal Radio app as well. Tune in pretty much everywhere. But if you need to, download the app. I know there's been a lot of weird technological stuff in the air lately. Some say it might be Mercury retrograde. I don't know. But I have a story for you about that later on. But right now, we are with Next Anyextee from AdeptInitiates.com, Anyextee.com. And you were telling your story about your visit with John Anthony West for the first time you were wanting to go. You know, real quick, I got to tell you, too, that was one of the first big interviews I did next that he was such just a normal guy at times. Like, here's what I'm saying. I was at work, and I was working for Verizon at the time. I just started the show, and I was taking chances. You know what I mean? Like, really reaching out to big, well, who I thought big names were. Didn't really think they were going to call me back or anything, you know, because I'm a nobody at the time. But, you know, one of the first people that did that was John, right? And I was walking back to my desk, and he called me, and I was like, what is this number from? I think it was from New York or Jersey or something. Right.
Yeah, upstate New York.
I picked up the phone, and I said, hello. And he goes, is this Joe Roop? And I was like, yeah. And I said, who am I speaking with? And he goes, this is John Anthony West. I said, get the hell out of here. Who is this? You know? And he goes, no, this is John Anthony West. I was like, are you kidding me? And my boss is waving me to come back to my cubicle, and at that point, I gave my boss the finger and kind of walked back towards the bathroom, you know, to finish the phone call. But yeah, he was a really cool guy. So, anyways, tell me you finished where you left off. It was something about the cabins or whatever.
Yeah, well, that was awesome. I was actually appreciating your story, and just not to derail, we'll go back into it. But it's interesting because he was actually the first big interview that I did when I used to have my own podcast. So if you go on my YouTube channel, you can see some of the listen to some of the old episodes. And so I'd wanted to do that podcast for some time, actually well over a year or two, but I did not want to do it until the very first show was John. And he'll do radio, but it's far and few that he actually does a podcast. But for me, he was like, you know, for friends, I'll do it for you. I typically don't do these, but for you. You know, and man, talk about honor and privilege. Like I was blessed to have him as my very first guest on my podcast when I used to do it. So I know what that feels like, man. I mean, I'd already established a relationship with him. I'd already known him for some time, but just to get him on the show, you know, I didn't want to roll out until, you know, I had to kick it off with the great granddaddy of them all. Because let's just keep it real at this point. Everyone in the field today that in the space, you know, researching the ancient mysteries, at least those who are, you know, really doing this, everyone pays homage to John. John has influenced everyone. You know, he's opened the doors for many of us. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for John Anthony West. and his work that came before us. And it's so important to acknowledge that, especially in this day and age where you have many researchers that are cherry picking gems from other researchers and everyone, complaining about taking each other's work and all this dramatic stuff. Ultimately, it's important to acknowledge and respect the architect, pay homage. Like I grew up with the hip hop culture, we would have to pay homage to the pioneers. So I came up in the 80s and 90s. I would have to go back and learn about those forefathers, Afrika Bambaataa, Kool Herc, the Zulu Nation that established hip hop, with consciousness in mind, by the way, even though that's changed in the music industry. And so it's the same thing in this field. Like go back and look at the great ones. Look at the mass. John would tell me there's no such thing as living adepts today. But in many regards, John was an adept. He was truly skilled at what he did. But yeah, so the story. So we were talking about the Dahabeeyah Afendina. Dahabeeyah is a private yacht. It's actually one of the best ways to experience Egypt on the Nile. You could take the big cruise ships. The problem there is they're really crowded with a lot of people. They're restricted to docking times. They land at the site at the same time, and you have this influx of tourists all going to the site at the same time. You don't get the same experience.
Yeah.
We don't go on a typical spectator tour. We go for the esoteric, the symbolism and to experience. So and that's where experience of going with someone who's been really is beneficial for anyone who wants to go to Egypt, coming with groups like ours, because we also take the Dahabeeyah and, it allows us, it gives us more flexibility. And this is something I learned from John. It gives us more flexibility to get to the sites at different times, to beat the crowd and get ahead of the casual tourists. John would refer to them as the grockles.
Is it crowded? Does it get pretty crowded when, I've always wondered about that.
Well, after the revolution and, the Arab Spring, 2012, all the media and the over-sensationalized stuff that was happening here in the States on TV, I can tell you I was in Egypt and it's not quite as dramatic. It's certainly, an instrumental event, an important event, not instrumental, important event, but it wasn't the way it was projected on TV and the mainstream. And it really scared and elicited or evoked a lot of fear in people. And that's typical TV and media news for you. The reality is it was really occupied to a small space, the Tahrir Square, a block. A lot of people came out. But, since that event, tourism dropped off and that really hurt Egypt. And Egypt depends on tourism. It's a major part of the economy and it hurt Egypt. And so that's why I think it's important for those of us who are not Egyptian born or live in Egypt, that go to Egypt, and have wonderful experiences, why it's important to come back and be sort of like this ambassador of Egypt and let people know that Egypt is safe for the most part. It's like anything else. In fact, it's safer. Look, I grew up in Boston. I've lived in L.A., New York. I've grew up in some of the I've lived in some of the cities in the States that have high crime rates. Right. I feel safer on the streets of Cairo at night than I do on the streets of Boston, where I grew up, or L.A. or
Little Rock's
in New York.
Bad too.
Yeah, Little Rock, man.
Yeah.
I remember banging in Little Rock back in the 90s, man. That whole thing. All right, so here's the thing. If you go to Egypt, citizens don't really have guns. There's not a lot of drugs. The crime, is different. I will say it's a little different speaking from a male perspective. In the interest of fairness, for a female to be alone at night, that's a different story. The reality of it is, especially when it comes to the trips and tourism, I'm just keeping it real here and totally transparent. When it comes to the tours, it's safe. You're going along the safe tourist routes. You're going to the locations. There's a lot of protection, a lot of security. And really, for some, when they get there and they see some of the security guards and they have guns, they're like, oh, it's guns, but it's really for the protection of the people. And so, I've never really had any major issues in Egypt, and I'm not going to say nothing happens there. Things happen in the world all the time. But the reality of it is, there's a lot more dangers that can be had in, dangerous experiences right here in the States.
Well,
than
I was specifically thinking about, when I watch these things about Egypt and stuff, I imagine myself out there at a starlit sky looking at the pyramid with nobody around, right? That's what you imagine it as. But when you go to a lot of tourist spots, you're kind of shoulder to shoulder. But I think John said something about that they kind of keep everything spacey a little bit, or at least back then they did.
Right. No, and that's what we focus on our tour as well. And that, again, that's a note from traveling with John and learning from John with respect to the business and providing the right experience for the people. That's what's so important. It's not about my ego as a researcher and what I have to share with you. Like, I've done a lot of research. I've done a lot of traveling. I feel that I have a lot that could be beneficial for others to learn from. But first and foremost, it's about the experience of our guests. Yeah. And, people pay a lot of money to go on these trips, and we want to make sure that they have, not only a spectacular time, but a transformational experience. And in doing that, it's understanding how to interact with these ancient sacred sites. Because if you're going to go there and it's mobbed with tourists, you're not going to have the same experience. And that's why the Dahabe has come in handy, because there's a little more flexibility. So we can get to sites earlier. We have great relationships in Egypt, so we actually get, access to a lot of special locations that are often passed over by the casual tourist. But we know how to work it, and that's the other part. Like when I do the Egypt tour that we're going to be doing this September, Esoteric Egypt, which is going to have a strong focus on R.A. Schwal de Lubitsch and the work of John, as well as the Rosicrucian tradition and really the ancient Egypt mystery schools and the living stone temples. I do it with Egyptian-born Egyptologist Sahila Hussein, who is my dear friend, wonderful person. The reason I am only working with her moving forward, one, we have great chemistry together. We're friends, and I've been with her a few times now in Egypt, but she was John's. See, when you do a tour in Egypt, you have to have, an official Egypt tour guide, Egyptian tour guide. So John leads the tour, but you have to have a tour guide there who's, academically trained or has taken the test and got the license to be a tour guide in Egypt. And so Sahila has been John's tour guide for several decades. So of all the tour guides, and there's some good ones and there's some good Egyptologists. That's the other thing I want to point out. In this field, especially ancient mysteries researchers like to create this common enemy with the academics. Hey, I get a lot of value from the academics. There's a lot to learn there. And same thing, everybody wants to knock the Egyptologists. I could give you a handful of Egyptologists that are so well read and have an understanding for the somewhat understanding for the mystery traditions and the mystical aspects. But Sahila is one of those rare tour guides that gets it, especially when it comes to symbolist Egypt, right? Perpetuating the work of R.A. Schwal de Lubitsch and John. She's traveled with John side by side on all of his tours. And so we're trying to carry that tradition. That's why it's so important to have her involved. And in fact, I remember, speaking to John, and he had a concern for Sahila's well-being and always wanted to make sure that she was taken care of. So that's why it is so important, for me to make sure that she's part of it. And we love her. She's just amazing in the field. And, she adds to the chemistry.
How do we go? How do we get to go? What do we need to do? I'm sold. I want to go.
You go to adeptexpeditions.com and you select the Egypt tour and you leave a deposit. And then you
put your deposit down, right?
You put your deposit down, you make a payment, and then we go. And I'm going to give you the experience of, because there's a crew of us that are going to give you the experience of a lifetime. And it's amazing. And so, if you have a concern about the temples being crowded, we can't guarantee things happen all the time. I will say that there was a period of years there where it slowed down, and many people people were still going to Egypt. John was still going to Egypt. He was there during the revolution. And so that was a good time, only not for Egypt and for their economy, but for tourists, because you virtually had the temples to yourselves. Now tourism is picking up. In fact, last year was a record year. Well, it's back on the rise, basically. Tourism is increasing again in Egypt, which means more tourists. However, that's why it's important to come with people who really understand the lay of the land, and that's what coming with Sahila and myself, it's like an added unmentioned benefit. because we know how to kind of maneuver and get to the sites at the right times to avoid crowds and bring you to the right spaces so that you get to connect with the site. One of the things that John was big on was the experiential aspect and allowing people to just kind of go in and experience the temples first. Then we come back. Then we do the symbolist tour. Then we guide you through and point everything out and have this ongoing conversation. But first, it's important to go in without any bias or preconceived notions to actually feel the living temples at work, specifically the Temple of Man at Luxor, or my favorite, which is Karnak, you know, and really all the temples. So that's key.
When people say ancient, though, it does feel as ancient as can be, doesn't it? Like I don't know, man. When I said this to John, and I'll say it to you. When I get around the Egypt symbology, not even being in Egypt, just buildings that have the stuff on it, even here in the States, I get a weird pull, almost like a deja vu type of pull, and a lot of people get that. It's kind of interesting.
Just about everybody who comes on these trips with us, and everyone when I've been in groups, when they get to Egypt, and it's funny actually because all right, before I even went on groups, like I said, I went on my own accord. I went there, you know, once to produce a documentary. And so I've been outside of the group thing and, you know, but I've also been with groups. And the first time I went, stepping foot on the Sahara, on the desert for the first time, sun beating on you, coming face to face with the great Sphinx, Tefnut, looking at her directly in the face. There's nothing. I mean, it was just such an amazing experience. And right away, deep inside me, I felt that call that basically you are home. And I was like, I really feel like I belong here. I don't know. Maybe it's, you know, I hesitate to say a past life thing or, you know, whatever it is, but I felt rooted. Now, in the interest of fairness, there's a lot of social conditioning that goes along with that. We're all taught that Egypt is the cradle of civilization, despite the fact Göbekli Tepe, you know, and forget Göbekli Tepe. You got Karahan Tepe, you got Sagmater, which I just did a blog on my site, which I have reason to believe possibly may even, I'm still working on it. I'm going to include in my book, may even go further back than Göbekli Tepe. Still working it out. But the reality of it is we don't know for certain, you know, the dates on some of these structures all around the world. Augustus Le Plongeon and his wife Alice Dixon. He was a Freemason and Rosicrucian, one of the first early Maya. I don't like using the term Mayan, but one of the first Maya explorers to actually document and take photos of the ancient ruins in the Yucatan. And it is their belief, he wrote a book on it, their belief that the Maya, and he lived among the Maya for like, I believe it was about 10 years or so. And he learned the language. He was very immersed in the culture. And so, and he's coming in, mind you, he's coming in with this Western esoteric perspective. And actually at the early stages, because he was certainly an influence and inspiration to Madame Blavatsky and the Theosophical Society, and even Harvey Spencer Lewis, the first imperator of the Rosicrucian Order, Amorc. They've all referenced his work. He was a phenomenal, prominent figure. I mean, Manly P. Hall purchased his photographs, and actually now they're in the Getty Library, in the Getty Museum in L.A., I believe. Yes, they're in. Is it in Getty or I think some are actually in Massachusetts. It might be a split, but I know that Manly P. Hall had purchased his photographs of the sites. And what I wanted to say here is that Augustus Le Plongeon had believed that Egypt was the outgrowth of the Maya, that the Maya were the remnants of this ancient civilization. You know, it filtered through with it, for lack of better terms here, Atlantis, or he would say Mu or Lemuria. Let's just say lost civilization. And eventually that trickled into Egypt. I'm not saying I wholeheartedly believe that, although I will say that there is a lot of evidence. I'm starting to come across stuff now in my own research and travels that suggests that that the dates are wrong when it comes to the Maya, specifically in the Yucatan. And really the Mayanists and archaeologists there are always in constant debate. It seems like nothing is permanent. Dates are switching around all the time. This site is actually older than this site. That happens often, and there's evidence.
You go everywhere too, right? You don't. It's not just Egypt. You guys go all over the place, don't you?
Well, I do, and my wife and I, we do our own personal, our private research trips, and then in addition to that, that's why we formed Adept Expeditions. Really, we were just doing our own research and traveling to a lot of these sites, and then what happened was I would be posting images or whatever on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and people would always, I want to come, I want to be part of it, and it just kind of grew organically to the point where we wanted to start including people and making them these community adventures and these study trips in the same vein as what John was doing. And John and I had discussed it. I had spoke to him about my interest in wanting to do Egypt tours. I had wanted to do Egypt tours even before my tour with Egypt. We were going to do a tour to support the film I was doing, Egypt Through the Glass Shop. We we're going to take people to Egypt, take them around to the pyramids, and then take them to the glass shop and teach them how to blow glass. And so, and I had known quite a bit. I've been interested in Egypt for a while and reading a bit, but I wanted to deepen my understanding and further my studies. And I knew John was the Obi-Wan. I knew John was the Yoda. And that's why I was like, I need to learn from this man. That's it. Like I went through it. This is the guy. I remember him when I was a kid from Mystery of the Sphinx. And, just everything he was saying really resonated with me. And his entire personality, his wit, his humor, his sarcasm, and his really I don't give a F attitude toward what people think about him.
I remember talking to him about that. I said, look, John, we try not to curse on this show. And he said, well, what the F ever, right? Well, let's just do it. And, I'm not going to stop him from talking, right? And the beautiful thing that he told me is I said, you ever worry about offending people? And he said, what? And I said, you ever worry that what you're going to say is going to offend somebody? He goes, no, I want them to be offended. If they're offended, then good. Maybe they'll listen, so his idea was about to shake the tree, right? It wasn't about to be safe or be in the club or be the next, I guess you could say, authority in whatever field. He really wanted to shake the tree and wake people up, and he didn't really care how he did it, and I'll always never forget that. And so I see that in you too as well. I don't want to go in too much depth of it, but I learned a bigger respect for you. You really knew how to pick your battles and when to stand up for certain things, because information and narratives shouldn't be controlled. They just shouldn't be. And there are times when they are for certain reasons and marketing stuff. And if your soul is really, as a truth seeker, you claim to be a truth seeker, then there are times when you got to put your foot down. And so, that was one of the things I really respected about you is you did at one point, and it really got my attention. And that's pretty much all I'll say about that.
Thanks for not going there. And I actually probably did maybe more than once, a couple of times in the last year or so. There was a dramatic shift with that, just dealing with some of the other people in the field that I was working with. And, but ultimately, if it doesn't resonate with me, if it's not aligned with my core values, I'm not going to fake the funk and pretend to be part of something. I've been a part of the music industry, which is completely plastic. It's fake. I was there. I ran a record label. I know what it's like to purchase the gold chains and rent the cars and rent clothes. And after the music video, it all gets taken back to where it came from,
right.
But yet the general public and, little kids are watching this stuff and they want to be like the rapper and they see all that stuff. And I realized over time how sick and unhealthy it was. That's one of those other things that I needed to move away from. And it's and I'm guilty of it. I'm a flawed being of light, having a human experience like everyone else,
Right.
And so that's, part of my mission in trying to inspire others and raise consciousness and work toward healing now is, to bring balance, because I was part of some of that stuff. And I found myself in a powerful position in the music industry, and so I got to a stage where it was like, I wasn't being responsible with that power, and I was falling victim to the way that it can influence you. It can take over you, and you start to work from a fear-based mentality, and so I was trying to move away from that, and I'm trying to bring balance now and restore that, because it's just not what I'm aligned with. But I will say that, you know what? Look, man, sometimes we have to call a spade a spade.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the bottom line. You know, and if you're passionate about what you do, you love what you do, and you know thyself, and you're working from good intentions and trying to do the best that you can, you put a lot of effort, time, energy into what you do, and someone comes along and for whatever reasons, whether it's jealousy or they feel threatened or whatever by what it is you do and their own insecurities, and they react in a way that threatens you and your movement, well, then, you know, there comes a time we got to call them out. And so I've had to do that on a couple of occasions, and I really try to hold back with stuff.
That's what I respected mainly out of it. Is that you could tell you were holding it so much that you didn't really want to do it, but it was forced upon you. It was forced upon you. Like when your soul, there comes a point, I think, in everybody's life where their soul's like, you know what, I can't take it no more, right? Like, you can't hold me in. It's coming out. And it has to, you know, it's got to come out.
Yes, totally, man. I mean, it's like the saying, right? Pressure bursts pipes. You can only withstand so much, and I can withstand a lot, and I try to actually, you know, John has no problem. You know, he'll give it right back to you. I do try to, and I will say that part of that has to do with the work. John was very much involved with the work. And by that, I mean the fourth way teachings of G.I. Gurdjieff, which another gift that was given to me from John, another powerful lesson, you know, turning me on to those books and that work. But, you know, part of that is shaking things up. You know, sometimes people need to be shaken up. They need to have that shock, that initiation to their system. And so they need to be uncomfortable. You know, and it's a good practice sometimes to try to do things and put yourself in positions to basically become comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, like that whole cleansing thing you did. That was scary, man. How long did you do that for?
Oh, okay. So you're referring to the
fast.
No food, water only fast. Yeah. So the last one I did was 5 days. It was a water only, no food fast. Not even I usually have an organic lemon in my water every morning when I get up. And so it wasn't even any sort of fruit. I wanted no sugars, just to work toward, you know, people want to deny these things. And I'm pretty healthy overall. I'm health conscious, I think, and I eat fairly well. I could use a little more exercise. I'm in front of a computer a lot. But other than that, I'm really conscious about what I put into my body, into my temple, right?
Right.
And so the reality of it is we all have parasites, you know, and there's adverse ones and then there's good ones. You have good gut bugs that are in there working to help your system, but we all get bad ones through our food, through, you know, corporate toxins from irresponsible captains of industry and corporations that are poisoning us in a plethora of ways. We won't make the show about that, but essentially these parasites work their way into our system. And so I just wanted to do a routine maintenance cleansing. So I did 5 days, water only, no food, no sugar at all. When I got off of that, then I did 5 weeks of a plant-based diet, strictly plants. And that was, I'm thinking, enough of time to try to cite, and I'm no expert on this. So before everybody calls in and, you know, calls me out on the science, this isn't my field of expertise. I know enough, but you know, I wanted to give it a 5-week cycle because there's parasites within you that are still hatching. And then there's very intelligent parasites that know, you know, the body is changing. I need to go dormant. I need to hibernate for a little while, and they'll pop up. So I feel like 5 or 6 weeks, they can't survive on a plant-based diet. They survive on carbohydrates, on your pastas, on your breads, on your wheats, on your
all
sugars.
The good stuff, yeah.
All the good stuff. And so, so I did a month of that. And another part of that, too, is discipline and self-remembering. And it really does work toward helping to increase consciousness and just becoming aware. You know, how many times do we just get up and go to the refrigerator or the cabinet or stack drawer or whatever you keep your food without even thinking, just kind of autonomously go and grab something to eat because you're hungry, because there's a signal inside of you. And it could be, look, studies show that parasites can affect our emotions. They can affect our thinking and our feeling. They can do things to your body that will trick the body into thinking it needs to eat when it's really just feeding. That's why we get these sugar cravings. That's why the bad stuff is the good stuff. And we become a condition to thinking the bad stuff is good because it tastes good, But I wanted to basically clean all that stuff out, so that's why I did that. But I'll be honest, man, I can't even front. It was literally like the 7th week. I not collapsed physically, but I caved in and I ate some sugar. I had some chocolate. I'm a human. I ate a chocolate bar.
Listen, what I want to do here is when we come back, I want to talk about the research, right? Like when we're doing research, how do we do it? Now, I don't want to say properly, effectively, become an effective explorer of consciousness, also effective researcher, as well as explorer, and maybe share a story or two. And also got something about the Emerald Tablet I want to ask you. A lot to ask you, but we'll be right back, guys, with next NEXT, AdeptInitiates.com, NEXT.com.
And Adept Expeditions.
AdeptExpeditions.com. There you go. We'll be right back, guys.
Music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
Magic, the occult, history, health, news. These are just a few subjects discussed on my radio broadcast, The Secret Teachings. I offer unique and objective perspectives on new and old subjects alike, while welcoming guests and presenting my own research with no filter. Visit my website for more information and to subscribe to my archive at www.thesecretteachings.info. And find me on The Fringe FM live Monday through Friday, midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern on The Fringe FM.
Food was different 60 years ago. It was minimally processed, free of pesticides. It was nourishing and healthful for your body. Today, GMOs, pesticides, herbicides, and heavy processing have depleted the nutrition of our food supply, which takes a toll on our health and energy. It's harder than ever to get the right nutrition. That's what Life Change Tea is meant to counteract. Our specially blended, powerful herbal formulas can give you more energy without caffeine. It's a mild cleanse, a mild daily detox. A good detox can help revive and bring back the energy of your youth. GetTheTea.com is the website. It'll cleanse you from the inside out with this herbal proprietary formula. Go to GetTheTea.com. There's no fillers, no GMOs. It's organic. Not available in stores. You must go to their website, GetTheTea.com. And their supplements are a great way to maintain your health. Read the testimonials on the website. Go to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com.
Who were the real ancient Egyptians? What is it about ancient Egypt that captivates us all? The critically acclaimed series Magical Egypt is back with all new episodes. Let Chance Gardner and company take you on another adventure through Magical Egypt in the new series Magical Egypt 2. Magical Egypt 2 attempts a forensic reconstruction of the science of the ancients through a study of ancient aesthetics. Also, the best researchers and authors in the field like John Anthony West, Graham Hancock, Laird Scranton, Robert Bouval, Lon Maladuquette, Aaron Cheek, and more join together to explore the topics of the esoteric and the hidden messages of the ancient Egyptians. Just go to magicalegypt.com right now and put in the code word FRINGE and get 10% off any download or order, including the groundbreaking original Magical Egypt series, as well as the new episodes in Magical Egypt 2. Also, check out the great work and the companion series at magicalegypt.com. Click the banner on the Fringe FM or go to magicalegypt.com and use the code word FRINGE and get 10% off your order today while it lasts.
Hi, this is Sammy. Join us in the Deep South as we're lighting the void with Joe Roop on the Fringe FM.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Yo-hoy there, Gigi here.
And I'm Cortana, and we're going to bring you on a journey through all things paranormal, metaphysical, ufology, and even psychedelic on our show,
Shift Happens, live, Fridays at 7 p.m. Pacific, that's 10 p.m. Eastern, on The Fringe FM.
And remember, kids, don't feed the Archons. Feed ducks instead.
Duck up.
Introducing Shadow Light Tarot from Waking Canvas, the Fringe FM's new contributing artist, Eric T.C. This hand-illustrated black and white self-published deck serves as a reinvention of the tarot, never before witnessed. Each of the several suits of this 88-card deck lineup form an infinite panoramic scene. Even the included visual companion guidebook is entirely hand-illustrated, cover to cover, with beautiful visuals and esoteric symbols and artwork. The newly released deck comes in a custom magnetic box with its own travel pouch. The Shadow Light Tarot Premium Deck and its travel-sized mini deck Wonder Light Tarot are both available now from WakingCanvas.com. If you use the code word FRINGE, that's F-R-I-N-G-E at checkout, you'll receive an extra 10% off your entire order. To discover more, including a free reading and time lapses of all the illustrated artwork, make your way over to WakingCanvas.com today. That's WakingCanvas.com.
All right, we are here with next Anyextee. You are listening to Lighting the Void Radio live on the Fringe FM. Thank you guys for joining us. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. Put your name and email in there. And I don't send them out as like I should. Anybody that does a newsletter should probably do it a lot. But I do it like once every 2 months. But when I do, I make it up. So you get a ton of free stuff and a ton of inside looks at the studio and a lot of recommendations of stuff that I'm reading. So just make sure you sign up. It's a cool thing to be a part of. There is a real quick, I wanted to touch on something here about research. I had an experience next with the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, not to be confused with, the Emerald Tablet of Hermes, which I have hanging on my wall here, right?
Yeah, but, right. Awesome.
I used to listen to these tablets like on audio because they're kind of profound, right? They're profound and it's real mystical and all of these things. I actually had a UFO experience one night listening to these things. However, when I tried to figure out, okay, where'd they come from? Who wrote this thing, et cetera, I took it to a friend of mine, which we all know, David Griffin, right? He's kind of loud about certain things. And I said, what is this? And he goes, channeled garbage, And I was like, what? I thought these were some type of sacred ancient knowledge tablets. And he goes, nope. And that's all he told me. And I was like, okay. David. So I was going to go look into it and try to figure it out myself. And I couldn't find out, who wrote them or what. And you did a whole video on the thing. Like you found out the guy that wrote it, the lodge that they were at, and all of this back information, which I can't thank you enough for. Because now we got a little bit of transparency on the deal. So I didn't know if you just wanted to touch on that briefly. I know you're going to go into more detail on another show that you're going to be on, though.
Yeah, so I'm going to be doing a live webcast on another show on Facebook on Friday. So if anybody wants to follow me on Facebook, it's Anyextee, Anyextee, and you can find your way there. And we'll go into much more depth. But yeah, so basically the Emerald Tablet I've always had an interest in because of my interest in Hermeticism and the alchemical tradition and the Rosicrucian tradition. Because the Emerald Tablet of the alchemical tradition is it provides a succinct summary, as Dennis Hauck, the venerated operative alchemist and leader in consciousness, would say. I like the way he termed that. He said it provides a succinct summary, which is true because it contains all the principles of, or the basic principles of the Hermetic mystery tradition. Then from there, we have the Corpus Hermeticum, and ideas kind of expand out with all the Arab texts that later got translated into Latin and English. But the Emerald Tablet, that's where the Emerald Tablet text is where we get our as above, so below, the one mind, the one thing, the Father, the Son is the Father, the Mother is the Moon, and so forth. Right. And really it's a formula that the medieval alchemists would used for the operations of alchemy. The same thing is expressed actually in Basil Valentin's, I don't know if it's Valentin or Valentine. I got to get the pronunciation
tomato.
right. Tomato tomorrow. I like to get it proper. But so, he had the illustration of the Azoth of the philosophers. He presented that in his book, and that has all the operations of the alchemist from calcination, distillation, and that whole process can, it's encoded in the Emerald Tablet. But if you work through that process, I mean, it's very powerful. You can use it for transformation. Essentially, it's for transforming anything. It's teaching us how to be, for lack of better terms, gods. In the esoteric tradition, it's often said that man is God or we are gods. Well, this essentially is giving you the power of the creator, or giving you the formula and the cause of things so that you can understand the cause of things to use it for transformation. That becomes powerful because what are the implications? We can use it for transformation personally, emotionally, spiritually, and even physically. And that is what the alchemists were doing, although not entirely, because alchemists were also philosophers of nature, and they're very spiritual. The alchemists would meditate and get in a certain state before they performed their experiments and went through the operations, because all the conditions had to be right, because they believed that their intent and their consciousness would actually affect
operation. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I mean, the same thing is found in the indigenous traditions when the sculptors in ancient Egypt are sculpting that stone statue of Sekhmet at Karnak, they're putting intention into the stone. Same thing with the Maya. It's known that intent was going into the stele, and so there is something about that we need to further explore, because this was at a time when, human consciousness was clearly at a higher level. I tend to lean, people that know me know I'm less of an ancient aliens guy and more of I tend to lean toward humans in a higher state of consciousness.
No,
and
say it ain't so. No, I'm just playing. Okay.
And so, we were talking before the show about how planetary bodies have an influence on humanity, and we know about the cycles of time and, the precession and so forth, which, by the way, I was invited to speak at CPAC, CPAK.
Really?
Just for a quick plug. Yeah, at the end of, in October. It's October 4th to 6th. I believe Newport Beach. It's the Conference on Precession and Ancient Knowledge. There's only one caveat here, and that is that they invited me to speak, but I need to turn in my presentation, and I haven't done it yet, only because I'm kind of juggling a lot. I got a lot going on right now. I'm setting up for the trips. I'm in the process of opening an alkaline water store.
That was same place John spoke at that he told me he was going to speak at before.
John is right. So it's put on by the Binary Research Institute by an incredible researcher in his own right, Walter Cruttenden. Amazing work. His book, Lost Star Myth, amazing work. And what the Binary Research Institute is about is really the celestial mechanics of the precession of the ages, and really understanding that, what's happening and how the implications of, the influence that has on us and consciousness in general. And it's really remarkable work. And I always feel like they have literally the best show in the business. It's so well curated. They always have the greatest speakers, and it's really well done. And so it's not a guarantee that I'm going to be there, because I have to turn the presentation into them soon. I'm going to be speaking on the high wisdom of the ancient Maya. There's a bit more to that. I don't want to give away my presentation just yet, but it's going to be following in the vein of John's work and Ari Shwala Delubich and their work in Egypt, and how I've kind of applied those, not kind of, but actually take on that lens and the Rosicrucian lens with my studies in the Yucatan with the Maya. And so if not this year, maybe next year. And even if I'm not there and you have the opportunity and you're in Southern California, go to that conference. Highly recommend it. But yeah, not to digress too much. So
I just wanted everybody to know that the Emerald Tablets of Thoth is not the Emerald Tablet, it is not the thing that the Hermeticists talk about when they talk about the Emerald Tablet. The Emerald Tablets of Thoth was written by, what's the guy's name? I didn't even know a guy. Yeah, I didn't even know how you found that info, to be honest with you.
So it's Claude Doggins, a.k.a. Doriel or M. Doriel or Dr. Doriel, which is only the pen name that Claude goes by when writing about esoteric subjects. Now, in the interest of fairness, you mentioned something about the works being profound. They certainly are. I don't want to deter from the value in the actual Emerald Tablets. There is certainly universal truths in esoteric wisdom that are included in his book, which was written in 1939. So the one thing I want to point out here is that it's widely accepted as a truth that there were these emerald tablets, plural, multiple, and that they were discovered in the pyramids and all this other stuff. If you go on the internet, it's all over the internet. In fact, there's a plethora of researchers today, that are claiming to be experts in the emerald tablets. I don't know how that's even possible because they don't exist physically. And the Emerald Tablets of Thoth is only an apocryphal work written by Claude Doggins as Doriel. So, the problem there is these experts that are claiming to have the secrets of the Emerald Tablets are really doing a disservice because there are no Emerald Tablets. This is the imagination of Doriel. I will say there is something to be said for the term true imagination, which is an initiatic term, and it's actually part of the Emerald Tablet. The symbolism of the emerald ties in with that because the Sufi tradition has this concept of emerald vision. In fact, this is expressed in The Wizard of Oz with the land of Oz. The whole thing is, it's esoteric. In fact, the creator was a member of the Theosophical Society with Madame Blavatsky. Now, founded by Madame Blavatsky. Now, Doriel was influenced and inspired by Blavatsky and the Rosicrucian order, Amorc and Harvey Spencer Lewis. There's no doubt about that. In addition to that, he was a science fiction writer. He was actually a fan of Amazing Stories, which was a popular publication, in his day, and they had the whole Shaver mysteries. He would write into the magazine. You could find him. In fact, I did a whole article. If you want to go into depth, you could go to Adept Initiates and look at Emerald Tablets of Thoth versus the Emerald Tablet, a definitive guide, everything A to Z. And so it's really, it's like a 5,000 word article, but it provides everything there for you, all the details.
It is a profound text. It did influence me. Just saying.
In short, though, it's important that people know that these tablets, plural, do not exist, that they are the mere imagination of this esotericist who was, in some regards, in competition with, at that time, there was a lot of different orders and factions kind of popping up and different organizations. And so there's a lot of evidence. And not only that, even in there's a lot of evidence that would suggest he was influenced. And further, there's actual instances where he's literally plagiarized, or you could see where he's just cut and pasted different words from previous authors. So what's important to understand is, yes, there's truths in that book, and by all means read it and take the value, but just understand the history and the fact that this was an occultist who borrowed and adapted these ideas from the great adepts before him. So if we go further down the line, the historical Emerald Tablet, shrouded in mystery. We can't be certain without a doubt that an actual tablet existed, and there's a case for the whole symbolic understanding of the Emerald Tablet and the fact that it may just be an initiatic narrative. However, there is evidence to suggest that there was an Emerald Tablet. Regardless, there are the texts. So our first written account goes back to the 1st century BC with Apollonius of Tyana, or Belinus in Arabic.
Yeah.
And so that in itself is an initiatic narrative that can be compared to the initiatic narrative of Christian Rosenkreutz from the Rosicrucians, and even Thutmose with the Dream Stela in Egypt. The Dream Stela, in that whole story. So if we were to compare them side by side, for those members of the audience who may not be familiar, the Emerald Tablet is attributed to Apollonius. And we know about this from the 5th century priest or monk, you could say, of Nablus, Sergius of Nablus. And so he was actually like a Christian monk. And he's the first one. He has the first written account. And so he's writing as if he translated from Apollonius's copy of the text of the Emerald Tablet. And he adds his own commentary. There's also these commentary notes that sort of have his religious agenda in mind. But in addition to that, he has the source. He claims allegedly to have source material. So the fact is, we do have to consider, hey, look, it might just be this guy who started it all. It may be Sergius of Nablus that had produced the Emerald Tablet as an initiatic narrative to convey a message in a certain way. However, there is evidence, legend and lore that goes further back, even into ancient Egypt. And this is in part why people attribute Thoth to it, because it has more to do with Hermes and the Hermetic tradition because of Apollonius' story. So in short, what happens is Apollonius of Tyana is a part of modern day Turkey. So really the Emerald Tablets that we know come out of Turkey. Apollonius, or we can call him Belinus, he was very erudite. He was a brilliant young man, and he had physical characteristics. It was said that, he looked amazing. He had this amazing intellect. It was almost as if he had brought everything with him from a past life. These were past life attainments. I'm not saying that's the case, but he just grew up advanced. In fact, he had to his father moved him to another school at one point. He lost interest there, and then he traveled and went to a Pythagorean mystery school. And part of his interest in the Hermetic tradition, and he goes back to his hometown where there's a statue. He's had this statue on the outskirts of his town. He would go, or the village, whatever have you, at Tyana. He'd go to the statue. He looked directly in its eyes, and he could tell that this was a man that had profound knowledge. And so he starts to when he notices there is script on the statue, he refers to it as the primordial language. Now, some scholars debate whether that's Syriac or Aramaic. Likely it was Syriac. I mean, there's a whole debate about that. And
there's
that
a lot of info there, by the way, guys, if you really want to dig into that. I mean, yeah, I knew about Apollonius, but I didn't know the rest of it.
Okay, so what happens is he reads this script, and and it basically, in short, not in these exact words, but tells him that, I'm Hermes, and if you really want to seek knowledge, look to my feet, or look below my feet, or drop to your knees. It sort of gives that sentiment.
Yeah.
Immediately, and he would connect with the statue. He was like, "Teach me, Hermes." He would literally go and visit the statue, on like a daily basis, and commune with the stone statue. And so he started receiving messages. And at one point, it dawned on him, he had this great insight that came from within. And so he began to dig below the statue of Hermes' feet. And he's like, something must be below. He starts digging and digging. And then he comes face to face with this cavern, the remnants of this cavern below the statue. It's very dark in this meandering passage, and he starts to go inside, and suddenly this gust of wind comes, and the winds are too heavy, so he couldn't maintain his light. He couldn't bring a torch inside, and I guess he got a little spooked out, and he comes back out, and he was really disappointed that he couldn't go down into this dark cave, and the winds were going in there, and he couldn't see. So he reflects on his experience, meditates about what just happened, go and basically goes into this meditative, sleep-like state, and has this prophetic dream. In the same way that the story of Thutmose and the dream stellar in Egypt, and the way he falls asleep at the Sphinx, and the Sphinx speaks to him. Something speaks to Apollonius, a voice deep within that he feels is a familiar voice, but he doesn't know who it is. Eventually, he asks the voice. It identifies as his greater self, right? It's sort of like the concept that Carl Jung has about the old sage, if anyone's familiar with that. And anyway, so this is when the messages come from within. And that's really the key difference between mysticism and religion. With religion, we're taught to look outside. Typically, you're going to go through an intermediary, a priest, or someone to, seek something in the heavens. Whereas with mysticism, you're going within. You are God, and you're finding the portal within to be able to connect with the cosmic in a way that allows the cosmic to flow through you. And that's really what it's all about. But so he gets this message, and it tells him, the voice tells him that he needs to find a translucent vessel to conceal the light. And lanterns weren't really all the rage back then. They didn't really have them. This may even be, I don't know when the first lantern In fact, it'd be an interesting research project to find out when lanterns actually popped up. But this would be like one of the first lanterns. So he went and got like a glass vessel, and he concealed, his candle and his flame after he wakes from the dream, and he goes inside. As he gets inside, he goes through the meandering passageway. He comes into the sepulcher of an old man seated on a golden throne, holding an emerald-colored tablet. This glossy green tablet has the text that we now know today. And before him were some books. The book on the causes of all things that Hermes had allegedly authored. So he scoops up the book, takes the knowledge back, and then from there, he just blossoms like a rose. And he starts traveling the world and teaching about teaching the Hermetic tradition and what he learned, the cause of things, and from the Emerald Tablets. And there's much more of this story. I don't want to take too much time on it, but he charges gemstones, and there was this whole underground market, the point where people started basically bootlegging stones. Like, I have a stone that Belinus had infused. But essentially, what's important here to understand is that these works, this text that he allegedly found and wrote about, and then this priest wrote about him. And we know about the priest, actually, Sergius from Ruska in the 1900s, the 20th century, maybe 1900s or 18th century. I'm drawing a blank here. You can get all the details in the blog. But he actually discovered it, it was recently that he found it in this appended version stapled to the text in a university, which actually predate everything. Because prior to that, the way we know about the Emerald Tablet in Europe, the European and Latin and then eventually English translations all came from Arabic. And so for a while, there was a very popular book, the Secret of Secrets, the Secretorium. My Latin isn't great, so I'm probably mispronouncing that.
Yeah, I know what book you're talking about.
There's a few different ways it's been titled. I believe it was John of Seville was the first one to translate it. It was a book with advice for kings. It was a pseudo-Aristotelian work, which basically means it was allegedly authored by Aristotle, communicating to his pupil, Alexander, and it had advice for kings, and it had texts about magic and astrology and just about every esoteric science you can imagine.
Right.
And so this was kind of circling around the learned of Europe eventually. It made its way, it was basically a book for kings, but actually John of Seville, when he did the translation, it was for the Queen of Portugal. So it was actually for a queen, which is interesting. But, so a lot of different... Go ahead.
You're going to get into this more on Friday, you said?
Yeah, so what, because we have so much more to
Well, no, I just want to make sure, because I know people are interested in this, where you're going to be at, the name of the show that you're going to be on, or whatever,
sure.
So they can listen
Absolutely.
to this.
Well, first and foremost, if you go to adeptinitiates.com, there's a 5,000 word blog. And if you go to my YouTube channel, part 1 of 3 is up there. And also, if you go to ancientegyptmysteryschools.com, that's my private membership site where I have all the videos and the series that I produce with John, which is an ongoing series, in addition to some practical stuff. I just did a lesson on the Emerald Tablets there, so you can learn not only we do the historical, we do the theory, and then we do the practical application. But more immediately, you can go to my Facebook page. It's going to be with Michael Angel, and it's called The Livecast. And it's basically his live Facebook feed. We're going to be discussing the Emerald Tablets in detail, decoding the Emerald Tablets. So if you're interested in that, you can find Michael Angel or myself next, Anyextee, on Facebook, and tune in on Friday. That's
cool, man. Well, so we're going to take a break. I want to get into the research aspect of this. So if you guys haven't figured this out yet, Next Anyextee is pretty well researched, right? So you guys can say that now, because I'm sitting here trying to, I've read some of the stuff you're talking about, but what I want to do, and I don't know if this is going to be boring to people, but honestly, I've got this opportunity. I don't care. So what I want to do is figure out how to be a better researcher. Because listen, I've got books stacked up like cordwood behind me. And it really kind of angers me that I know I'm not going to be able to read all this stuff. I just want to soak it all in. And so I know you've become pretty efficient at being an effective researcher. But we can talk about that too, and also want to talk about some of these Rosicrucian orders and temples, and maybe some of your experiences as well. Be right back.
Out there.
There's something out here.
And so are we. KTLK Digital Broadcasting, The Fringe FM.
All right, everyone, this is Justin from the UK. Excuse the chitty. If you're into the Fringe and you want to hear the brass tacks, my old china plate, Joe Roop and his guests on Lighting the Void will open your mince pies. You need to shut your north and south and use your 10-speed gears and listen to them bubble. You could hear a Barry Crocker, no Brussels, but he ain't no holy friar. Anyway, you be the Barnaby Rudge and take a butcher's.
Hey, Fringe FM listeners. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to the Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere. The Fringe FM loves hearing from you. Have a suggestion, comment, or question? We're all ears. Email talkback@thefringe.fm.
Your home has needs. It needs a healthy, dry environment all year round. Start by getting rid of the worst air in the basement and crawl space, where the problems begin and make the whole house sick. Introducing the new Smart Wave Ventilation Unit. It has advanced technologies to continuously reduce moisture, mold, and odors, and expel radon, gases, and pollutants. And now, Wave units include carbon monoxide detection to automatically expel air at a high rate and send you an alert. It also has an app so you can remotely monitor the conditions. Wave is a comprehensive, maintenance-free, affordable solution that will transform your entire home. Protect your home and family with what it needs. Give it a new Smart Wave Ventilation Unit. For more information, call 888-717-WAVE. That's 888-717-WAVE. Or go to dryhealthyhome.com. That's dryhealthyhome.com.
Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
Greetings, galactic community. This is Suzanne Ross, host of Sci-Spy Radio, every Wednesday evening from 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific. Join me for this brand new show featuring a revolutionary new genre, Sci-Spy, merging science and spirituality to give us answers to the greatest mysteries of creation. Together, scientific discovery and spiritual revelation reveal the truth about who we are, where we came from, why we're here, and where we're going. Tune in to Sci-Spy Radio every Wednesday from 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific and discover the truth for yourself at thefringe.fm.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
This is Elle. I listen to Lighting the Void because it's interactive radio with good content, interesting guests, and a humble host, sharing this journey through the esoteric. Hey, Joe Roop. Thanks for having us along for the ride.
Thank you so much for a delightful evening.
Well, I got a lot of ground to cover.
Follow The Fringe FM on Facebook and Twitter at The Fringe FM. Want to know what's on The Fringe FM? Check out our schedule at thefringe.fm.
Obviously, by now, I hope that you guys can see that actually being an effective researcher of truth is a much deeper hole than most can imagine. You know, we listen to a lot of radio shows and YouTube and all this other stuff. We get a lot of information from it. But when you really dig into these ancient texts and books, you'll find out that it doesn't always line up with what you're being told. But tonight, we're here with Anyextee, and fascinating guy, man. You are full of knowledge. I could listen to you talk about this stuff all night. But the thing about it is Gordon White came on this program, and he's a chaos magician. Some people like him. Some people don't agree with magic, whatever. I learned a lot of stuff from this guy. And the one thing he told me was, when he came on the show, was, listen, a lot of times things are transferred ideas are transferred between books without ever being challenged. So just because you're reading a book doesn't always necessarily mean that it's true, right? So I was thinking that's a pretty profound statement, because the more I look into books, they are repeating a lot of ancient stuff. And so I heard you on this show called This Esoteric Life, which you just recently did, which is another really cool podcast, where you were talking about how you learn to go to the references of the book to see where they got their information from. And so I'm trying to learn to become a better researcher when it comes to things like that. So I would appreciate it if you could share with us next some of your tips. You know, say we walk into a library, and this is kind of a tough question, actually, and there's tons of books where we got limited time. What do you usually do?
Well, it's not really a tough question when you're living it, so it's an easy one for me to answer,
Oh,
because
good.
I'm going to be speaking from experience. I know that situation very well, so much so that, my wife and I we live maybe about 2 hours south of Mount Shasta in Northern California, and about 3 hours north of the Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum and Rosicrucian Park in San Jose. Within that block, on that block, which has an amazing alchemy exhibit and the largest collection of artifacts in North America when it comes to authentic Egyptian artifacts in Northwestern America, the Alchemy Garden, the planetarium. There's a lot of really cool stuff there, but my favorite part is my favorite structure there is the research library. And so that's pretty much, when we're not traveling, that's our home away from home. Like, my wife and I will literally drive down there. It actually takes about maybe 3 hours and 4 hours with traffic. And we do it often. And we'll spend the gas money, we'll put in the time, and we'll go down on a Friday, we'll go in the morning, and we'll be in there from open to close. And we'll stay the whole weekend. Same thing. Saturday, open to close. Sunday, open to close.
Really?
So, yeah, we live in a library, man.
That's awesome.
And so I absolutely love the library. And so, we have a small one here, and it's cool. And I got some gems, and I've got some books. I've been thinking about maybe doing a live video, taking people into the house and showing them my work at some point, my books, and talking about the books. That might be cool to do. But, there's so much more in the Rosicrucian library. And when I used to live in L.A., Los Angeles, I would frequent Manly P. Hall's Wisdom Library. And it took me a while to get into that one. It wasn't
Philosophic Research Society Library? Is that what you're talking about?
Yep, Manly P. Hall's Philosophical Research Library, their Occult Wisdom Library, which is massive. I wrote a blog on that. If you go to adeptexpeditions.com, I do a virtual tour of the library. I share my experience, what it was like, what I had to do to essentially break down the doors, metaphorically, to get in there. And then I take you through a virtual tour and talk about some of the stuff that's in there. It's a blog article that I wrote a few years back that a lot of people really like. But so let's say, I'm in the Rosicrucian Research Library. There's a few different ways I approach it. It depends on my intention for that day. Sometimes I'm going in with something specific that I want to research, a specific topic. So, let's say right now I'm researching the Maya. So I'll just go, and I know that library like the back of my hand, so I'll know exactly where to go and where to find the right books. And so I'll get specific books. Or maybe it's a book that came across, my travels or experiences. And so I want to find a specific book they have there. Other times I'll just go in, and it's funny, that library has a way of having books kind of just fall off the shelf when you need them. and moreover, it's like, man, if you're into esoteric and, esoteric literature, occult science, and all of this stuff, like, how can you not love that place? You're just surrounded by rows and rows of books, and every single one of them will likely speak to you. You can't really go wrong. But yeah, like, we'll like literally live in there for hours. I'll like skip lunch sometimes just to stay in there and read. I'm like that obsessive about it. I try to use every single minute to that I can while I'm there. I try to make good use of my time. And so, me personally, I have a few different approaches. Sometimes it's just going in and randomly finding stuff, or sometimes it's going in on a specific mission, which is most of the time that's what we're doing. My wife will be researching one thing. I'll be researching another. We'll go grab the books we need. We'll hit the books. We'll plow through them. One of the techniques that I do use, they allow you to take photos in there. So I'll take my iPhone, notes and photos, it's always getting full. I'll literally go through books and I'll just snap photos of every single page so that because you can't take the books out there. You have to read them while you're in the library. So I'll like snap a lot of photos and then take that home. And then I have, this little library in my phone. So maybe, I don't know, maybe we're out running an errand or something and I have some free time, I'm out on a road or something. I can just go through my phone and read those books. So I've actually cataloged a lot of books that way in my phone, or at least chapters or pages or specific things that I wanted. That's one thing I do when I go there. But I do enjoy sitting in there reading. There's just something about the experience. They have so many cool artifacts in there that relate to the Rosicrucian tradition. And just being there, knowing that Harvey Spencer Lewis, the first imperator of the Rosicrucian Order Amorc, and his son Ralph Lewis donated, a collection of books to the library. Just knowing that these guys actually touched it. That there's something about that, the essence and the pages, and being able to connect in that way. Maybe I'm getting a little too woo-woo for some people.
Yeah, but some of the books,
it resonates with me.
They're so big, and I'm thinking, like, for instance, I got the Secret Teachings of All Ages is a pretty big book. The Gnostic Bible, the one they came out with, I got the really big one, and I still haven't read through all of that. There's so much knowledge. It makes me wonder, how people talk about wizards and John Dee and all of these Renaissance folk. I wonder sometimes if they literally did just sit in libraries day after day after day and just read, and that's all they did. Kind of like you see in the Game of Thrones. They got that big library with all those maesters around. There's just too much.
I would think so. John Dee was living at a interesting time when a lot of these texts were becoming available. They were only previously available in Arabic, finally becoming available with Latin translations and so forth. He's just a mastermind, borderline avatar. And actually, if you're interested in his work, you should check out one of my favorite researchers, Alan Green, Decoding Shakespeare on YouTube, or his book Decoding Shakespeare, which John Dee has very much had an influence on that work. His research is phenomenal. If you get the opportunity, check out Alan Green's work. And just to let you know a little bit about him, I actually met him during a study trip with John Anthony West. I was supposed to be John Anthony West's roommate. There's a whole other story to that. We could probably talk about some other time. But I ended up being Alan's roommate. And, he just blew my mind. And when he presented this material before John, and as you know, John's a straight shooter. He doesn't, there's a handful of people that he expresses his respect for. He appreciated, he seemed pretty blown away by Alan's work. And even Robert Bivol, at Contact in the Desert, Robert Bivol got on stage and was like, there's a gentleman in the audience by the name of Alan Green. Alan speaks at CPOC, by the way. He's going to be there this year. So if anybody gets the opportunity. But anyway, John Dee's very much tied in with Shakespeare. But, John Dee had this massive library, and the library was taken away from him at one point. They came in and, there's this whole issue where they basically raided his house and took all these works and so forth. And then even some of these other guys like Claude Dawkins, who scripted the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. He had a massive occult library to draw inspiration from. So I know how I feel when I get around these books. I wish I had more time to meditate and read.
Right.
And ultimately, at the end of it, one of the things that John taught me, the books are just a way to get you started on the path. The answers are not in the books. They're a great guide. They're great for opening your mind up and feeding you some nutritious information. But ultimately, the answers come from within. And I think people a long time to realize that. Ultimately, all the answers are within. And so the core message when it comes to my work is meditate. Through meditation, you'll find it. But if you're into reading and you enjoy it, and I always wish I had more time to do it, try to immerse yourself in as many books as possible. It's not just the libraries, but even at home. I've got books in the kitchen. I've got books in my bedroom. I've got books in my car, books in the restroom. Every moment that I have an opportunity to read, and then I also will try to discipline myself and set time aside every day. I try to make time. It doesn't always work out because I travel and the schedule changes, but I try to make time to meditate and I try to make time to read. If I had more time, that's all I would do. If I was extremely wealthy and super financially successful and didn't have to worry about paying bills and providing for my family, I would read and meditate all day long.
Wow, man. See, and I have this thing where when I get around a lot of books, I want to read it. Even when I get on the Audible, right? I'm like, no, I want to read that. I want to read that. I want to read that. And I can't control. I think it's ADD. Maybe I'm just whining about my ADD. I don't know. But I feel like I can't finish books. Like I'm reading 4, and I'm going back and forth between them all. This brings me back to the idea of symbolism, where you're talking about going within. I think sometimes we can get a lot of information from just a symbol, right? That almost has books of knowledge in it. And you hear about people talk about downloads and stuff. I think the Egyptians kind of understood that. And that's why they use symbolism so much, because it just kind of taps into your soul a little bit better.
Oh, absolutely. Symbols, like books, are tools to communicate. They just do it in slightly different ways, but it's about expressing that communication. So, the reading the books, actually, the symbols are more powerful, I believe, than the books. You're using different parts of the brain when you're reading, as opposed to just seeing the symbol and leaving a conscious impression on you. The great mystic G.I. Gurdjieff would refer to like objective consciousness and subjective consciousness. And that's what the temples in Egypt are doing. It's what the symbols are doing. They are intentionally evoking a certain response and communicating or transmitting ideas. And we can interpret them in different ways. There's multiple symbolist interpretations, but essentially at the core, it's the Emerald Tablet. It all derives from the one thing and the one mind. At the core of everything is that essential truth, the essences. There's a lot of different symbols that mean a lot of different things. So
I heard earlier you brought up the fact that you're not really an alien guy or whatever. And I don't really consider myself, I don't know, I guess I could be an alien guy. But there are narratives that talk about that we are seeded by aliens. There's a lot of that book stitching and all that stuff. I don't know how they could know this stuff, right? If you really get into doing the research like you do, it's kind of hard to me how they get into this stuff, how they get this narrative. They talk about the Book of Enoch, and they just kind of interpret the symbols and paint this narrative, right, that we were seeded by aliens. When you put it all together, it makes sense. But I don't really know if that's true. And now these are some of the big questions in my mind as a truth seeker, what we want to know. Who are we? Where do we come from? Is there life out there? Where do I really have a soul? And if I do, what is it attached to? So we're drawn to these texts. And then when they feel real, we take them on as truths, because at some point, I think next we have to get past the facts and just go within and say, I really know this is true based on my experience and my feelings. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yes, totally, man. And so with respect to the alien conversation, I don't want to give you the wrong, or listeners the wrong idea. I do believe in the possibility of extraterrestrials. I've had an experience myself. And so let me come out of character for a minute. I'll share this with you. Actually, it's funny. John introduced me to Contact in the Desert the first year that he went there, and I went and helped him set up the projector and everything. It was part of our, the ongoing relationship and learning from him after the trip. Anyway, I remember him telling me, this thing's a real circus. And I had loved Ancient Aliens. Yeah. I absolutely love that. The time that I spent equal time on the couch, after leaving the music industry, watching Magical Egypt as I did watching episodes of Ancient Aliens. And I absolutely love the show. I think it's entertaining. I don't agree with all the twists and spins. I will say that, they never confirm or say it's absolutely aliens. It's always could be, must be, possibly. Right. And so that's the thing. People give Giorgio a bad rap. He never really said beyond the shadow of a doubt. He's just presenting the possibility. And it is possible. Anything is possible. It could be unicorns and fairies and dwarfs, whatever you want. Mm-hmm. Anything is possible. There is a lot of weird things, again, weirder and weirder. There's a lot of stuff that's been happening for a long time that is unexplainable. And so I guess it also depends on your definition of alien or extraterrestrial. Right. We're talking about blue avatars or, the grays or really, I would lean more toward interdimensional forces or beings more aligned with the netters of ancient Egypt and these energies that, the traditional shaman of indigenous traditions tap into, that sort of stuff, more terrestrial and cosmic as well. But, I will say that I'll share this experience with you. Okay. So this is something that I don't think the other night I talked about Sekhmet on this Esoteric Life podcast, but I don't think I've ever talked about this experience anywhere.
All right. An exclusive. Cool.
Exclusive. Okay. So my first experience at Contact in the Desert, they would promote that, if you come out here and people are seeing aliens and this and that. And I've heard a lot of stories about Joshua Tree. And so I went out there, and I can tell you beyond the shadow of a doubt, I did see an unidentified flying object. Now, was it an extraterrestrial craft? I can't say. What I can say is I was with a group of people, and I remember, and we all saw the same thing together. And actually, I seen stuff 2 years in a row there. And the second year, I brought back my crew. And we were doing a lot of interviews. We were running around filming people and doing interviews and so forth that we had set up. And, my crew from Adept Initiates that was working, they were kind of blown away too, because we all saw these weird flashing lights, jumping around in the sky before we left. But rewind 1 year, my first experience there, my first year. And I remember Giorgio, by the way, getting on stage talking about this. And he said, as long as I've been with Ancient Aliens, all this stuff, I've never had an experience until I came to Contact in the Desert, until I came to Joshua Tree. And for the first time, I experienced an unidentified flying object. I had the same experience. We went, they have this little side attraction where you could go out into the desert at night and everybody kind of camps out and looks into the sky. And there were some, so-called authorities or experts there. And I don't know, that's not my field of research, so I don't study it well enough. But one of the experts identified, we were looking at something in the sky that had a really strange pattern in flying. It looked as though it could have been a satellite, but then it was taking these really quick, odd turns. And then it looked like two of them had split, or it looked like it split into two. And I can't be certain. Maybe I just didn't see the second one at first, but everybody else there kind of experienced the same thing. Everybody was like, oh, the second one just popped up. And I mean, it was a lot of excitement. So it was kind of a blur to me. But I will say that there were these unidentified flying objects in the sky that the expert provided reasons why it would not be a plane and why it would not be a satellite based on, I guess the navigational paths or whatever. I forget the exact science on it. I wasn't too into it because I'm not really into the alien stuff so much anymore. But I certainly seen, with a group of people, we experienced an unidentified flying object. And like I said, then the second year, same thing. There were like these flashing lights. And I questioned it. I'm like, man, do they have like people, hiding out trying to like shine these lights in the sky or something? I don't know, man. And like Joshua Tree there's so much mystery there. It's on top of water aquifers. Like, all the conditions are right for, like, you know, an ancient sacred site. That's the ideal place you would build a temple on top of. You know, you have the quartz, you have the water aquifers, they have the Tegratron there, you know. And so, yeah, man, that one was interesting to me. And like, I do want to say that I was into aliens, you know, and in the 90s, I read Sitchin's works. I read through all of them. In fact, I used to be in a hip hop group, and we rapped about the Anunnaki back in 1996. I have a song where I'm like in the chorus, we're rapping about the Anunnaki back then. So I've been into this stuff for a long time. And it wasn't until like the late 90s and really toward the end of Sitchin's career that I felt like he started contradicting himself. And then after that, I started digging deeper, and I started realizing that what he was saying, some of the stuff that he would write about in the book, didn't exactly match up with the source material that he was referencing. And if you go back and you look at that stuff, I mean, you could see where he kind of stretched the truth. And so that was always a concern. And you know, after that, there's just more that I started studying, and I kind of moved away from that. I will say that when Ancient Aliens started being televised, I was very much interested. And I love the show. In fact, I don't watch TV. I have no interest in TV. And the only thing that at one point, I don't even have a TV anymore. I just have a projector, and I'll project like documentaries or YouTube once in a while. I'm more of a book guy. But excuse me. But when I had a TV in the last days, the only thing that I'd pretty much use it for was to watch Ancient Aliens. And so I do believe that show provides a wellspring of knowledge and really provides inspiration for people to want to get out and see these sites or learn about these ancient sacred sites. The other side of that is I can see through the Hollywood production, and I can see where the truth is being stretched. And it's not always the researchers themselves. You know, you have to understand that, hey, some of these guys have said some stuff, but the production company is truncating it, taking it out of context, taking one little soundbite, playing it over and over. And unfortunately, then, you know, that becomes your perception of the researcher who may have more to offer. I absolutely love Giorgio, man. I think he's a great guy. I think David Hatcher Childress is, I mean, that guy's a beast. He has his entire book business, and he's just traveled the world. He's like Jack Kerouac and Indiana Jones put together in a blender. Those guys are great. You know, there's other researchers that just aren't aligned with my belief system, and the truth meter isn't resonating when they come on. And so, like,
I guess what I'm getting at is, I know you don't know the answers to this, because an honest person would say that they don't know, or they can't prove it, or don't have evidence of it. But what does your gut tell you? What do you think? What is your theory, based on your research and your feeling, that where we came from? Do you think we always came from this planet? Do you think we came from any ideas, man? Like, I'm not going to take it as ultimate truth. I just want to know what you think. What you might be thinking.
Yeah, ultimately, I'm kind of indifferent to the outcome, because I don't know. I wasn't alive back then. I wasn't there to witness it. I'm not going to pretend to be an authority on something that no human on this planet knows for certain beyond the shadow of a doubt. You know, and I'm sure there's plenty of people that will not appreciate that comment and disagree with me because of their experiences, be it remote viewing or channeling or so forth. But I will say that I think it's reasonable to conjecture that there, you know, was a time when perhaps some sort of life came from out of space, or, you know, came from beyond this planet. But I'm thinking more in terms of some sort of microscopic parasite that lands here, and over time, that's where we evolved from. You know, I'm not totally, you know, again, I don't know. I don't have the answer. As far as extraterrestrials, I will say that I think the large majority of stuff that we hear, it's just recycled false narratives that come out of books. And I also think there's a lot of like psychosomatic experiences. However, I'm not going to take away from that, especially with the esoteric understanding that goes along with that. I'm someone who's very much into meditation. I'm a member of the Self-Realization Fellowship. That's Paramahansa Yogananda's organization. I joined to basically learn years ago to try to understand the science of Kriya Yoga and meditation. And so I do understand what humans can actually do within themselves when you work on yourself, and the sort of experiences that can come from that, and what we can do with our mind and so forth, true imagination. But, I'm not buying it, man. A lot of the authors and researchers and the alien stuff, it's sensationalized. And I feel like a lot of it is just people trying to sell you books, Right. Not all of it. And I don't want to take away from people who have had experiences, though, because the reality is there is something that's been going on that's unexplainable. And certainly I don't want to hurt anyone who has had that experience. I'm in no place to, question another person's experience. I've experienced things like in the temple, chapel of Sekhmet, and this, this UFO and some other things that I would sound crazy talking about to the average person. They would, and I wouldn't be my work. I really try to take the scholarly approach at work, but it wouldn't be accepted because, he said aliens, but I do believe in transparency, and I feel like that's where we need to move forward with everything. Like, let's just get to the source. Let's really work together to find the answers. Let's put all the pieces on the table, and let's have intelligent conversations. And, it's okay to have disagreements. We can talk about it. And then eventually it's all going to surface to one absolute truth.
Yeah, we got to take a break because I got commercials pulling on me right here, but we'll be right back.
Food was different 60 years ago. It was minimally processed, free of pesticides. It was nourishing and healthful for your body. Today, GMOs, pesticides, herbicides, and heavy processing have depleted the nutrition of our food supply, which takes a toll on our health and energy. It's harder than ever to get the right nutrition. That's what Life Change Tea is meant to counteract. Our specially blended, powerful herbal formulas can give you more energy without caffeine. It's a mild cleanse, a mild daily detox. A good detox can help revive and bring back the energy of your youth. GetTheTea.com is the website. It'll cleanse you from the inside out with this herbal proprietary formula. Go to GetTheTea.com. There's no fillers, no GMOs. It's organic. Not available in stores. You must go to their website, GetTheTea.com. And their supplements are a great way to maintain your health. Read the testimonials on the website. Go to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
Hey, Fringe FM listeners, did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to the Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere.
All right, welcome back to Lighting the Void. Sorry about that. We had a little technical hiccup there. I want to blame it on Mercury retrograde. That's what I'm going to do. Whether you believe in it or not, that's what I'm going to blame it on. We already had some weird stuff happen. I'll tell you about that story. We had lightning struck the studio this weekend. We had the station went down like Sunday night and was down for 24 hours while we were trying to debug it. Now it's kind of glitching a little bit, but we're on Spreaker too. Guys, if you want to come over there as well. I don't know. I got to believe in it by now, next. I'm just saying it happens every single time. It's got to be real. And, John wrote a book on this too.
Yes, he did.
He did. Yep. He wrote a book on the effects of the planets. And, he made a case for astrology. which I thought was really cool. But what I wanted to ask you about, when you look into the Rosicrucian orders, which I know this is what you're a big proponent of, there are so many societies that go back, right? And you're a big, I guess, proponent of Amorc, which is one of the more well-known societies. Did you look through all these different societies, or did you just choose them because it resonated with you more, or because of the convenience of the temples? By the way, I'd love to visit one of those temples. I'm sure they're awesome to go into. How did you make that decision? I'm just wondering.
And so my interest in Rosicrucianism, I guess, started a long time ago. I remember, I think, seeing in like some science fiction magazines, and older ones, there'd be this little ad with wings on it. Thoughts have wings, the Rosicrucians. And I was always compelled by that. It just, the marketing spoke to me. And it wasn't until, and that's the genius of Harvey Spencer Lewis, who was multi-talented, the first imperator of the order. It wasn't until I got my hands on Wisdom of the Mystic Masters by Joseph Weed, a friend of mine, had let me read the book. And I was like, wow, they have the cure for headaches in here. And so many, what really pulled me in was the practical application in this book. And that's not even attributed to Amorc. That's another Rosicrucian work. But that's what led me to wanting to understand more about it and then the Rosicrucian tradition. And so from there, I started to realize, okay, there's all these different orders and factions and groups. And so I did do quite a bit of extensive research on many of them and still research today. I mean, and at this point, there's hundreds of Rosicrucian groups. But the most prominent in my, in my experience, the Rosicrucian order, Amorc, has done a wealth of service. And I believe it's a valiant effort, a value of anyone who is interested in becoming a member, and you can go to Rosicrucian.org to learn more. Or if you're not certain yet, you could watch the series, which is entitled The Sacred History of the Rosicrucians, which I produced and narrate for the order. Again, you can find that on their website, on the Rosicrucian TV YouTube channel, or my channel. And I guess I just, in researching all the different orders and learning about everything, I was really compelled by Amorc. In addition to that, their physical presence, they have, lodges in the States and all over the world, actually. And then what really, really pulled me in, though, when I was already studying and researching it, but when I was living in Los Angeles, we went to the lodge there, and I went in. They have a small library, and it was open to the public on that day. And so I was just like, oh, the library. I love libraries, and the people were all so welcoming and open and shared a lot of similar interests. And so I was like, okay, this is interesting. And then I wanted to go up to see. Actually, did we go see? I think we went to see the Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum first. But, in that process and going through that and then really starting to connect with the Rosicrucian order, Amorc, and then I started going to some of their public lectures, presentations that were given by the Grand Master, and everything just lined up. And I'm a huge fan of the Grand Master, Julie Scott, the way that she presents her material, the way she presents herself. I mean, I've learned a great deal from her. One of those things that we could use today with these issues with the radio station that you have in there is tolerance. Rosicrucians really not only walk the walk, but talk the talk. And there's this principle or attitude toward the strictest of independence, but also tolerance. And with that being said, tolerance toward others. So, we're talking about John and how he has no problem responding, or offending others, whatever. I'm a little different. I differ from that a little bit in the sense that I do try to practice tolerance, and so I'll withstand a lot. But when it comes to a point, like we said earlier, pressure burst pipes. So there's a lot of different characteristics and the people themselves. And I was really compelled. And what had happened actually is the Grand Master actually watched my series, Ancient Egypt Mystery Schools. And then I was contacted by them and eventually contracted to do some work for them. And then I began producing and narrating. And I've actually produced a lot of videos and so forth for them, and did the research for the projects and the narrations and so forth. But aside from working with them as a client, I'm not, just to put it out there, a lot of people think I'm a member of the Rosicrucian order. I'm not. I will say that I practice the Rosicrucian tradition, and I'm a Rosicrucian at heart. And it's really all about the intelligence of heart. This is by no means to say, don't join the order, because I highly encourage it. If you're looking for a mystical path, it's definitely a valuable experience for anyone. There's so much rich wisdom that you can learn in the principles, the timeless principles that they teach, and the way that they teach, which is facilitated over time. Now, I've done a lot of research. I've dug deep, and I've one of those guys that I for whatever reason, people tend to open doors for me. I've been given a lot of exclusive access and privileges to different situations that, typically people don't get access to. So I've been able to see and read a lot of different works and stuff. And so, man, it's if you're interested in Rosicrucianism, I would first recommend doing due diligence.
Yeah.
Just like anything else, not just with this, but with anything, you want to use discernment and do due diligence. Try to research as much as you can. Look at all the different, things that are available to you. I looked into everything. There's a Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. There's a lot of different orders, and they all have, different aspects that are interesting to them. But I do work close to the Rosicrucians, but I absolutely love what they're doing. And, one day I may actually become a member, but right now I would say I'm a friend and defender, and I practice the Rosicrucian tradition. It's funny because a lot of the Rosicrucians themselves actually think that I'm a frater. People be, frater Anyextee, you are. And I feel it. I am.
You are. It's not to me. It's like masonry, and I don't mean to interrupt you on that, but I get this question a lot, man. Hey, what order do you belong to? Are you a Mason? Are you this? And I'm like, man, these teachings are timeless. Number one, I don't think you have to join anything to be that, right? But it is scary. There are people that want to do it, but then they're kind of hesitant because they don't want to get drawn into something that. I guess they don't want to be duped, or they don't want to be a part of something that might have something inherently sinister, evil to it, or just something, right? They really want to, but they hesitate. And I found that fascinating. I don't know, maybe it's a psychological thing, maybe it's a part of your spiritual journey, but I'm in total agreement with you on that. If you really study the Rosicrucians, you go from Rudolf Steiner to Max Heindel all the way to, even Manly P. Hall. They're all teaching this stuff, and they're all teaching different aspects of it. It all goes back to alchemy and hermetics, and you don't have to join an order. But if you like fellowship and you like places to go, I don't personally do not see any harm in it. I really don't. I think it's a good thing, actually.
Yeah, and definitely you want to check out the older works of Rosicrucians, not just the Manly P. Halls. And Steiner, I love Steiner. I think he's done he's a springboard of information. He's done an excellent job in conveying the Rosicrucian tradition and philosophy in his work. But, go back and look into the work of Robert Flood and Michael Meyer and, even the traditional Martinist order, which is closely linked with Rosicrucianism. Look at the works of, Papus and a lot of the French occultists. There's so much valuable information out there. And really, a lot of these prominent figures served as inspiration for, the occultists like Manly P. Hall. It's interesting. Manly P. Hall and Harvey Spencer Lewis have a lot of similarities, but they didn't really sit well with each other. You have Manly P. Hall in L.A. with the Philosophical Research Society that was the structure was designed by Stacy Judd, who was very interested in the Maya, and he has several structures in California that are based on Maya architecture. And the Philosophical Research Society was designed in that way. There's parts of it that are reminiscent of Maya architecture. Whereas in Northern California, you had Harvey Spencer Lewis, whose vision was to build the Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum. So you have the Maya structure with Manly, and then you have the Rosicrucians with Harvey. And if you were to put them in a ring and size them up, in one corner you have Harvey Spencer Lewis, who wore, who bared the Rose Cross, which represents the uniting of two opposing elements, the cross of matter with the four branches evoking the four cardinal points, and of course the rose representing the unknown, or sub rosa, essentially, and the blooming of consciousness, the flower, the blooming of consciousness. Another Martinist, Josephine Paladin, I'm probably mispronouncing this, Josephine Paladin, he expressed this concept in his book, the ad rosum per crucium per rosum, which essentially means to the rose through the cross, or by way of the rose to the cross of the rose. Very profound. When you really start to understand that symbol and how the cross essentially represents the cross of matter that we're all crucified upon as spirit manifests into matter on the temporal plane.
Yeah.
It's very profound. But, Harvey, he was very talented. Manly was very talented. Both very well informed. Harvey wore a cross. Manly wore his cross. They both started organizations. The difference is Harvey Spencer Lewis, I believe, and I could be wrong, I got to double check, but I'm pretty sure that they both had a background in marketing. At that time, I think it was for the railroads and stuff. You would do writing and marketing and so forth. So both of them understood the art of skillful speaking and writing. And, I just think that the Rosicrucian Order Amorc really took off because it's a massive organization. Again, there's lodges and members all over the world. And Manly never really reached that same, and that it was certainly his intention, because what a lot of people don't realize is Manly Hall used to have his own little church. He was like a priest or his own little organization. And it never really, he gained a lot of notoriety, especially with the Freemasons. But, he never really grew his organization to the extent that Harvey Spencer Lewis did. And Harvey Spencer Lewis actually issued a statement. You could find the old records if you search for them, warning people about Manly P. Hall. Those two guys were kind of in competition, and it was a feud, as all the occultists were. Many of the occultists were at that time. Everyone was, and a lot of the activity was in California. You had the Rosicrucians, you had Manly P. Hall, you had many others, and so, it's interesting when you look at both of them side by side, and Harvey Spencer Lewis had basically notified Rosicrucians that Manly P. Hall, and I'm not saying this in his exact words, but the idea expressed is that Manly P. Hall is not part of the lineage and does not, doesn't necessarily have a full understanding of what he's talking about. Whereas with Harvey Spencer Lewis, his initiation is interesting when you dig into it, but he had a mystical experience, and then he went to France and he was actually initiated. There's a lot of interesting factors to that. I love Harvey Spencer Lewis, so I don't want to go into great detail about it. You can take it.
It gets tough, though, as a researcher, right? Because you start learning these profound things from these men that are very well researched, and then when they get to battling each other about certain things, you're like, whoa, wait a minute, I've been following this guy for so long, and this other guy, so who's right?
Yeah.
And you get, I hate it, to be honest with you, especially in magical societies, because and that's something else I was going to talk to you about, is they get in these lineage arguments, and I don't care about lineage. I mean, lineage is important to me, I guess, but I'm just trying to get to the bottom of the truth. So I don't see the point of fighting over lineages and stuff, but they get political, man. And it starts to get a little bit annoying,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And, it's interesting because Manly P. Hall, and I love Manly P. Hall too. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to take anything away from him. And it's interesting because Manly P. Hall actually wrote about not deifying the speaker, basically, and some other esotericists have written about this as well. But, we all look at Manly P. Hall. Everyone loves Manly P. Hall. Everyone goes to the lectures. He's, widely popularized, and, Masons, not all of them, because different people have different opinions. But, Manly P. Hall is glorified, damn near deified. And the reality of it is, like Harvey Spencer Lewis, like Madame Blavatsky, like every one of us, we're all humans or beings of light having this human experience, and we all have our own flaws and, you know, character traits that are not always favorable, you know? And so you get that too. Ultimately, what you have to remember is every book you read, it was written by a man.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that.
We're not perfect. We're just working to perfect ourselves, to perfect the philosopher's stone. That's the process of alchemy.
But what about his death? That was a little weird, wasn't it?
Yeah, you know, I really don't like to speak on it because it's awkward and it's
weird.
Controversial, and it is, and it's kind of creepy in some ways. I mean, there's the whole bit about, you know, working basically with the enema at the end. It gets really weird. So I don't like going there. And the reality of it is, I don't know for certain. I wasn't there. I will say a good book is, I was lost for the title the other night. Is it Master of the Mysteries or Mysteries? Master of the Mysteries, I think. It's by Louis Sagahorn. He's an LA journalist of Mexican descent. And he has a remarkable book on Manly P. Hall. It is essentially one of the best books that you could, most comprehensive, I don't say best, most comprehensive books that you could read about Manly P. Hall. Really digs into everything, showing the full picture, not just glorifying Manly P. Hall, but some of the weird stuff. And he's interviewed, you know, his Manly P. Hall's second wife, and other close people, you know, that were associated with Manly P. Hall. And it's an interesting read because there's a lot that, you know, a lot of people may be shocked about when it comes to Manly P. Hall's life, things that you didn't realize. And the other part of that is Manly P. Hall, one of the things that was phenomenal, well, a couple of things actually. One, you've got this kid from Canada that, you know, comes to California, and within a short period of time, he's writing this remarkable text that essentially encapsulates, you know, a lot of the mystery traditions. And it's just way beyond his time. Must be aliens. No, the reality of it is he had a lot of help, you know, and people don't realize that. His first wife was very instrumental in writing that book. She committed suicide. There were definitely issues between her and him. And, you know, she used to work basically the merch booth at his presentations. And, you know, you have to put yourself in her position. Here's someone who helped gather a lot of the research that went into the book. And yet he's glorified. He's getting all of the respect. And, you know, and she's not alone. Manly P. Hall, he was like a leader. He was like a boss. He had a whole operation. What people don't realize is he had, you know, especially once he had his financing, but he had a crew of people working under him, gathering research, and then he would take it, read through it, you know, whatever his process was, and present the material. But it wasn't like he was a one-man show that had, you know, all this stuff. You know, I've
always wondered about that.
Yeah,
so that's how he did
remarkable. Yeah, he's remarkable, and he's extremely talented, but he had a lot of help. He had people who were very well versed in the ancient mysteries early on in his journey, help point him in the right direction. And as he moved forward, he was intelligent enough to form these organizations, and he started developing almost like a cult-like following of people who would come to his church when he was still preaching. And eventually he had help. He had interns, and they were all working together, and they were all finding material for him, consolidating and amalgamating that material. You know, again, his wife helped, and, you know, and so he's had influences. So we can't just say it's Manly P. Hall alone. But again, I don't want to remove any credit from him because he is a remarkable figure. He's been a massive inspiration to me. But he's not alone. That's the name we always hear. You know, Harvey Spencer Lewis was also talented, also was very prolific, has so much work out there, and also speaks to the practical application. And that's what I liked about Manly P. Hall, because he was really taking this ancient wisdom and transforming it for modern living, you know, taking these ancient ideas and expressing how we could apply them today. And that's what's most fascinating to me, right? Because that's what it's really all about. When we talk about how to be a better researcher, well, first and foremost, let's do due diligence and practice discernment. Let's not just accept what we hear and read. Well, let's understand that it was written by a man. Let's understand that he was influenced by other men who were influenced by other men, and people have been writing and rewriting and revising history for, you know, probably since time immemorial. The stories change based on whoever wins the wars, whoever comes into power. And so we always have to kind of almost approach everything with a grain of salt. But the other part of that is, don't make it just about intellectual pursuit and ego and, I know more than you. It's not about that. It's about how are you using it on your, with your personal journey today? Where, are you taking this ancient wisdom and what you're learning and trying to find the practical application in that?
You and I talked about this before the show, man. Right? We were like, we're in the age of the storyteller in my mind. And I think that's because we've got access to a lot of knowledge, right? I mean, we do. And I have listened to a lot of shows and even audiobooks, and it's just facts. And it's so much facts that you want to hear them, like, well, how did you feel? Did you see something? You want to hear about somebody's experience, because I think, man, deep down, we really know that our experience is what really conveys our truth. It's the one thing that we can go to that we know is true, even though in our past, we've always pushed our experience to the side and went with the words in the books. But I think now we're starting to know better a little bit, go inside of ourselves and get that experience and then say, okay, that really happened. This really happened. Doesn't matter what the book says. This happened to me. Right.
Yeah. Yes. And I love how you just said go inside yourself, because I believe that the way to truth is through intelligence of the heart. And that's a work that takes place with inside yourself. And so, experience over things. Totally. When I was in the music industry, everything was very materialistic. And even my mind state, it was about, chasing the money. You're in the monetary system. You always got to grow. You're running a corporation. It's all about profit. And that's just so sick. It's not conducive to humans at all. In fact, it creates cognitive dissonance, and it keeps us separated. And so coming back to studying, researching and actually traveling the ancient sacred sites and trying to understand all this, and then applying having the experiences and then applying the practical application. It's like to practice the divine and cosmic principles are far better than, merely talking about them or professing them, and experiences over things. That's why what we're doing with Adept Expeditions and these community adventures and study trip symbolist tours that we're doing, it's really about the experience. We're trying to facilitate a transformative experience and give people something more. And for me, like, I've given up a lot. I used to, I was a bit of a hoarder, man. I used to collect a lot of different things. And I had a massive vinyl record collection and books. Books are the only things that I collect today. But there was one period, that phase that I went through there where I just kind of cut all of that. And when I moved from Boston to California, I got rid of everything that I was holding on to. The only thing I took with me was my car, my computer, and some books. And I let it go. And it was such a relief, because I had formed attachments to all these things. I thought I needed them, or I thought I need them for the future. It was really like an obsessive compulsive thought pattern that I had to go inside and rewire. And now I'm able to travel light. And as opposed to spending my money on things, I'm investing my money in good works and services from others who are aligned with raising consciousness, and mainly experiences. I'll tell you, man, like at the John Anthony West experience, at the end there, I had done well in music, things were shifting, but I had also done a lot of traveling. I took my money and I just started investing in experiences, traveling the world, China, Japan, France, Egypt, Mexico, wherever I could go. I've been in all 50 states. I drove around all 50 states trying to explore the mysteries, from the, mysterious stone chambers that I grew up with in New England, to coming out to California and trying to, explore Mount Shasta and everything in between. Chances are, if you live in the States, I could probably tell you about the mysteries in your state, and I've been there. And, but traveling is an experience, it's a transformational experience, and it's one that's part of the esoteric tradition. You had the venerated alchemist Paracelsus. His father instilled the ideas of traveling in him. And that was important for the learned at that time, to travel, to expand your worldview. Where I grew up in Massachusetts, south of Boston, most people never even leave my neighborhood, let alone the city. So it's a big deal like, it was a big deal for them when I moved away or moved out of state. But what I do now is also inspiration for them and others to say, hey, look, you can be here too. You can be in Egypt too. And people will look at that and be like, well, you have the money to, that's not entirely true. It's about having a vision and crystallizing it and manifesting it. And, the secret, that film that came out, that's a half truth, and it's based on the Emerald Tablet. You have to crystallize your vision of what you want, but you also have to do the work that leads to that. And that's where most people tend to fall short when there's work involved. Everybody wants what they see, but they may not be willing to do the work. I do the work. And that's what I'm trying to show others, and like John Anthony West, like, truth be told, at that point, I had spent so much money from traveling and stuff that I was damn near bankrupt. I was on the tail end. I went from having heaps of money to having next to no money. And I honestly didn't even have enough to go on John's trip. It was nearly $6,000. And I was actually, when I reached out to him and talked to him, and his trip was full, but then he reached back out when he realized I did a film, and he was like, hey, come along with me and film the trip. No one's really done this in this way, and you can document the whole entire thing. Of course, there's the Magical Egypt film and others, but no one's really, I guess what John was telling me is that because there were issues with cameras in Egypt before, no one's documented the whole trip. So he made a special exception for me to come on this private study trip with the Enneagram Institute, where I was actually going to roommate with him. Like I said, it's a whole other story. But and then when the opportunity opened up, I had some hurdles. Number one, my passport was expired. It was expired. I didn't even realize it, and I was like, oh man! And I was literally a week away. I had to jump through all sort of hurdles. I had to go to the office in Boston and like just pull a lot of strings to get my passport expedited on time. In addition to that, I was kind of strapped for cash. I did not have the $6,000 to go on his trip that was going to take place a week or two from now, but I needed to find it. And so, at the time I used credit cards, and I actually put myself in debt. And I had left the business behind. I wasn't working. I was in this transitional period, and I actually put myself in debt. And it was financial debt, wasn't it? But it was totally worth it because it was the educational experience of a lifetime, and it was transformative for me, and it changed my life. What John shared with me and the experiences and the knowledge, it totally transformed. And it took a while. Like, honestly, I had to go back and review a lot of the footage over the course of the next year or so to really comprehend a lot of the concepts. I had to go dig deeper into his books. And then obviously he would give me more books to read. Well, first I had to go through the Schwaller stuff, and then and that's
no easy read, by the way.
No, it's certainly no easy read. And neither is Gurdjieff. That's why John had recommended first reading P.D. Ouspensky, In Search of the Miraculous, before you get into Meetings with Remarkable Men by Gurdjieff, which John was very much involved with the work. And, it's been an inspiration to me. My wife, even more so. She's read just about everything you can imagine, Gurdjieff. And so, and for those who aren't familiar, the fourth way is a whole other discipline. And John was a practitioner, and it's very powerful. But, like things like that. And like John introducing me to Pythagorean number mysticism, and the idea that through Pythagorean number mysticism, we can gain insights into number, knowing that number is key to function, process, and principle. Also, his teachings about presence and the symbolism of Schwaller and the living temple of man at Luxor, the idea that the temple both symbolizes and is the time and space. It is time and space in strict conformity to the relevant laws. In fact, I might have actually just quoted John. That's ringing in my head. I'm pretty sure that's how
do you guys not want to? How can you not want to travel with this guy? This next I want to. I can see myself camping out right now, listening to you go on spills in the Yucatan somewhere. That's what I want to do. I might have to take the radio station with me, but
come with us. That's a remarkable journey. We've talked a lot about Egypt, and that's one of the things that I want people to know when it comes to Mexico, because Mexico, a lot of times the first thing that comes to mind is the iconic Chichen Itza site where the pyramid, where you have the Temple of Kukulkan, aka El Castillo, the castle, right? That's what everybody, when they think of the Maya, it's that or the calendar, or you have, the general tourist, which views Mexico as the party place. That's where you go. You go to Cancun or Tulum during spring break. But that is just missing the mark. There is literally thousands of temples and pyramidal structures throughout Mexico, and heavily concentrated in the Yucatan. In fact, only a small portion, a very small portion, has been excavated to date. In fact, my wife and I have gone on private research trips, many of them on private land. We have friends who have entire, Maya complex basically in their backyard. Our friend Eduardo grew up playing in the ruins. Imagine having like all these structures, ancient Maya structures, right where you live. And so it's not uncommon for locals to have remnants on their property and find artifacts all the time. My wife and I have been to many uncharted, lesser known, more obscure ancient sacred sites in the Yucatan, and we actually make a few of them available on the tour. We bring our guests and members of the expedition to some sites that and this isn't a sales pitch, but I promise you, no other tour operator, at least not right now, are bringing groups to. And these sites are remarkable. I've had an amazing discovery at one, and just about every year that we bring our tour group there, somebody is making a discovery. And so, I mean, there's so much to the Yucatan, man. In fact, I think I'm probably going to be posting my blog this week and next week about the Hidden Pyramid. And eventually I'll get the video up. Again, we've been to many sites that, like this one particularly, is not on any archaeological map. You wouldn't even know it's there. And yet the size of this pyramidal structure rivals that of El Castillo Kukulkan at Chichen Itza. And there's megalithic stonework on the top of the structure, at the structure, which is unheard of. For the Maya of the Yucatan were not known for working with giant megalithic stones. We have evidence. We have, yes, they were. It's there. And there's all sort of alignments there. I'm not going to take too much time talking about it now. People can read the blog article when I post it. So
there is a good point in the chat room. Catalina says, one of the best reasons to travel is to take you out of your comfort zone so you can get that experience. I think that's
love it.
Yeah, that's a pretty good statement there. The biggest times that we learn about ourselves is when we go outside our comfort zone. So look, man, we've brushed on, and believe it or not, this guy is full of, he's full of information. I can tell you're trying to register everything and you don't want to go on too many subjects too far down the road,
Yeah, I feel like I'm going on these rants, and I don't want to.
We love rants
on your show.
But the last question I have for you, because we've talked about aliens, secret societies, the esoteric spirituality experience. So I've really gotten to know you a lot. And this is one of my last questions for you, because we only got a few minutes here, and then we'll tell everybody how to follow you. We're also we're in this age of people are talking about aliens, and the big thing is presenting aliens and alliances and conspiracy and the dark cabal, right? That's the big thing going on now. Another big thing going on now, which I never thought was going to be as big as it is a lot of people are into magic and stuff. And when I started talking about magic per se, I understood it from a point of view that it wasn't to be taken lightly. It wasn't something to dabble with and things like that. Now, I've had magicians come on the show that I believe are true magicians that said, look, I know how dangerous it is. I know that it's real, and I know what you're talking about. I know the risks, and I'm going to do it. And I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. But what I'm worried about, and this does worry me, because I do believe that we do have internal powers, divine gifts, and I believe there's this whole other realm, because I've had my own experience with it, that we're just now learning to tap into. And so I like to be a little bit more careful with it, even though I don't mind discussing things with people and talking about it. I'm just wondering what your view on this whole magic thing is. Like, there's so many people just diving straight into it that I kind of worry a little bit,
Well, let me ask you, Joe, what is your definition of magic?
Man, that's what everybody asked that question, right? And mine is not of Crowley's. My definition of magic is a little different. There's two types of magic, right? There's manifestation, right? Putting your will and power and energy into something to manifest something that normally wouldn't happen if you hadn't done so, right? And then there's another type of magic, which is a spiritual enhancement alchemical type magic, where instead of going through tons and tons of lifetimes to get to a certain point in consciousness, you put yourself in a boiling pot through certain practices and rituals and meditations to get to this level of consciousness, which is like hardcore initiation type stuff. These two types of things. What I get from people is like, oh, you know, lightning struck Joe's studio. He must not be a very good wizard, which they are completely ignorant of what I'm talking about on both ends, right? And then so, you know, it's like, yes, I'm a wizard. I can also prevent my death, and I'm immortal. You know, you guys are just, I'm sorry, you're ignorant when you say stuff like that. You don't know what you're talking about. And I'm ignorant on certain subjects too, so that's fine. But
well, we all are.
Yeah.
I mean, ignorance is not knowing, and we don't know everything. Like, as much as I've studied, I'm also a student. Mainly, I'm a student on a mystic path. I'm not a great teacher. I'm just someone who is interested in learning and happy to share with others. As far as the magic stuff, what you're saying to me, it sounds like I kind of understand. I know there's different definitions of magic, and to quickly sum up for you, I would say that I kind of view magic, and I know this may not be aligned with all the traditional concepts of magic. I view magic as a science that is misunderstood, as something we don't understand, but I think there's a lot of other ways, other lenses that we can look through. For example, your first concept of magic, to me, is nothing more than intention.
Yeah.
Putting intention and using will. Yeah. And there's a lot that could be said about that when it comes to the esoteric sciences, the occult sciences, and, you know, all these traditions throughout time. And again, the practical application of that. And the other form of magic that you spoke of, to me, just sounds like alchemy, which you could say is a magical process or a magical formula, depending on your definition. If you're trying to achieve the Philosopher's Stone, if you're trying to achieve that immortality, if you're trying to achieve a state of true imagination where you can refine the essences, burn off, like, okay, so...
Well, we don't have time for the alchemical process.
We don't have time for the whole okay, yeah. So, yeah, good thing. We don't want to go on an alchemical tangent.
Do that when you come back, though.
But yeah, so in short, you know, it's the alchemy. You know, and in many ways it is it could be viewed as a magical process. And that, along with intention, if that's your definition of magic, then I'm aligned with that, because I do believe in these things. I know them to be true. I've worked with them. I'm not a magician. I'm not a big magic guy. It's not my thing. I know there's a lot of people out there now selling magic and magic programs and magic books. I know some is derived from Crowley. I know other organizations, you know, perpetuate magic. I personally, I'm not an expert, so I can't go deep enough into it and the definitions of it. I don't practice it in that regard. However, I do believe that we're all magicians doing magic every single day with our intentions and manifestation. Like I've been manifesting since I was a child. If I wanted something, I took the thought from my mind and I just worked to crystallize that thought, and then did the work to make that a reality. And that's how I've achieved and accomplished everything in my life, from when I was an employee and looking at the boss and sitting there and realized that he could afford to buy his time. And I was like, wait a minute, I want to do that and manifest that. Or for something I wanted, I manifest that. If it was going on a trip with John Anthony West and I'm strapped for cash and don't have anything, manifesting that. Whatever it takes, just focus on it, meditate on it, spend your time thinking about it so that it's so crystal clear and vivid, not only in your mind, but that you can feel it. Try to smell it. Try to see it so clear that it becomes your reality. Stop practicing that over time. But in addition to that, do the work. Do the things that lead to that. Even if you don't know how, doing something is better than nothing. If you make mistakes, great. You learn from the mistakes. But just start working toward that to manifest it. And that's the magic that I've always worked with. That's what works for me when, you know, I want to manifest something. So if that makes me a wizard, so be it.
You are a wizard, brother. And we would like to have all of the ways to follow you.
Okay, so first and foremost, I would say check out adeptexpeditions.com. I post a lot of my research in the blog there, and that has all the information if you're interested on coming on any of our community adventures, study trips, or symbolist tours. You can also check out Adept Initiates, which is a blog and a community. It's myself and many other contributors that contribute to that blog. In addition to that, you can go to anyextee.com. That's ANYEXTEE, and just register there to get on my email list. That's mainly to get updates for my forthcoming book, which should be ready to publish at the end of this year. And then finally, ancientegyptmysteryschools.com. There you can find my ongoing series. I still have many episodes with John in it that I haven't even released. I've got hours and hours of footage still that need to take shape and edited.
Right.
But that's where you can find that series. In addition to that, we've just started doing more practical classwork, like teaching on the Emerald Tablet and stuff like that there. And make sure you stay tuned in to the Fringe FM, and of course my man Joe Roop on Lighting the Void, because independent platforms like this are important to give speakers like myself and others the opportunity to present our work for you guys.
Been a real pleasure. We'll have to do it again.
I would love to be back. Thanks for having me, man.
All right, guys, that's next NEXT. All the links are going to be on the show notes, and don't forget, we got to roll out of here really fast. So this show was produced by the Fringe FM. It cannot be syndicated without written permission. Music was by Chronox, Bundy, Space Station, Kevin MacLeod, and some music from the public domain. We'll see you guys tomorrow night. Good night.